Okay, City Clerk, are we ready to get started? Thank you, everybody, for waiting patiently while we transitioned here. This is the Encinitas City Council meeting.
Hold on just 1 second.
Okay, hold on a second.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
1 minute. All right, we're ready to go.
Okay, this is the Encinitas City Council meeting. It's the regular meeting on Wednesday, April 20th, 2022, and it is 6:23. May we please have a roll call?
Yes, Mayor. Sorry. Councilmember Hinsey,
Here.
Councilmember Krantz,
Here.
Councilmember Lyons,
Here.
Deputy Mayor Mosca,
Here.
and Mayor Blakespear.
Here.
Record will show that all members of the City Council are present this evening.
Okay, thank you, and I invite you to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin. We have no special presentations or proclamations today. Do we have oral communications?
Yes, we do. We have 9. I'll call you 3 at a time, and just a reminder that you do have 3 minutes. The first 3 speakers, Mark Wilcox, Jimmy Seville, followed by Christy Clark.
Good evening, City Council. Mark Wilcox here. I was saddened by the proceedings of last week because as a lifelong volunteer, it seemed that Mr. Ehlers had no financial interest in the interests and city policies he had strong opinions and concerns about. I realize this is a complex issue. However, it takes strong opinions and great concern to motivate people to volunteer and to leave their home and to participate in city meetings. So here I am, as a parent and grandparent before this City Council, wishing that the City Council had followed through on supporting city policies that were in place in 2020, which banned marijuana businesses, and had spoken out against Measure H, which would change the city's policies and bring marijuana businesses to town. The public is faced with coming here every week, and they haven't missed a week, calling attention to you and the public, especially parents, regarding the burgeoning problem of marijuana messaging and promotion that comes when there are pot shops in town. One small problem is the inadequacy and shortage of warnings on marijuana generally, and specifically on products sold in pot shops. So I spoke last week about pending state legislation SB 1097 entitled the Cannabis Right to Know Act, authored by Senator Richard Pan, a pediatrician, regarding expanding and increasing warning labels on marijuana products. One of the speakers in support on behalf of parents was San Diego County's own highly respected Dr. Ronit Leave, emergency physician at UC Scripps, San Diego. She said, and I quote, "I see firsthand the growing tide of people ending up in our emergency departments with psychosis, severe anxiety, delirium, accidental ingestion, severe vomiting, car accidents, and other problems associated with using cannabis," end quote. This is the doctor who treats these patients. Californians deserve to be accurately and clearly informed about potential health risks of marijuana so they don't end up in our emergency rooms. Due to the dramatic increases in THC concentration in marijuana products, there is an urgent need for more clear, prominent, accurate, and comprehensive health information for this city's and the county's young people so we all understand the risks of marijuana use to their mental health and cognitive development. Thank you.
Next is Jimmy Seville, followed by Christy Clark, and then Garvin Walsh.
Hi, thank you, Jimmy Saville. First of all, I'm glad you're keeping this plexiglass barrier up here to help keep everybody safe from the coronavirus. But sadly, most people are so out of touch with reality that they believe that the only kinds of transgender people there are men who transition into women and women who transition into men. And I got news for you. There are over 57 different genders, and one of those genders is no gender, or gender non-binary, or gender neutral. And in fact, if you don't believe this, you can look up this article on ABC News. These are people who don't identify as either men or women. They use they, them pronouns instead of he or she. And a few years ago, Facebook acknowledged this. They updated their options from the old-fashioned, antiquated gender binary, male or female, to 58 different genders. You can read this article from ABC News. And so I'm tired of these people not getting acknowledged and the respect that they deserve. And recently, singer Demi Lovato and Sam Smith came out as gender non-binary, no longer use the pronouns he and she. It's they and them, which brings me to my point. After my wife read this article on NBC News about how a lot of parents are now raising their children as gender non-binary, just try to keep up here. That's neither a boy or a girl, using they, them pronouns. We decided to transition our 3-year-old adopted son, Timmy, into a gender non-binary child. But Timmy was still a traditional boy's name, so we changed his name to Baphomet, after the god worshipped by the inner circle of the Knights Templar. And that's when all of the problems started. The child daycare center said that, what do you mean this is not a boy or a girl? It can't be neither. And we said, well, haven't you seen all these videos on TikTok? There's even a lot of gender non-binary teachers that are teaching elementary school. And they said that this was strange and even insinuated that this was child abuse. And I said, well, why do you think the LGBT community expanded the acronym to LGBTQAIP2K+? Because there are dozens of different genders and sexual orientations, and the plus means that there are even more than are signified in the acronym. And so I'm tired of having to explain this to everybody. And so now that gender nullification surgery for children is covered by Obamacare, that's what the Health and Human Services Secretary said, we took Baphomet in to get the surgery, and we were denied by 3 clinics here in San Diego. So we found one in Tijuana that luckily performed the surgery. So I'm tired of hearing this crap that Baphomet is a boy, and that these people are still following this antiquated view of the gender. And we're very thankful. We found some books on Amazon for the LGBTQAIPK2+ children's community, like Jacob's New Dress and Sparkle Boy, which one is about Jacob wearing a dress to school, and he's a really cool kid. And so we're very excited to be finding cartoons on the streaming services, like She's Out. It's about a boy who finds a ring that turns him into a transgender superhero. And we think that the Disney promoting the cartoons for the transgender LGBTQ
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your comments.
That's the kind of non-binary phobia that I'm talking about.
Okay.
I don't understand. I don't want to listen to this. Yeah, why don't your time is up. Yeah,
Thank you.
Shame on you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Christy Clark, Garvin Walsh, and then Jedediah Stuber.
Thank you, City Council, for allowing me to speak. I just wanted to make a statement regarding Olympus Park. And number one, I love the park, so I need you to know that as I go forward. I was just surprised at the last City Council meeting that I attended when Mayor Blakespear accepted an award for the park. Since the first day I went to this park, it was obvious this is not a neighborhood park, but a destination park with 2 dog parks, skate park, basketball, pickleball facilities in our city, all a wonderful part of the park. My biggest concerns are the lack of a bathroom facility in the park. There has 2 very large gathering areas, a big covered pavilion, picnic tables, definitely a destination place to hold a birthday party, a gathering of many people. Bring your dogs, bring your kids, and no facilities. On my very first week there, I actually submitted a photo of a child peeing in the bushes, facing the homes that face the park. Then I'm sure some parent just felt it was really important not to leave the park, or it would take too long to get in the car, drive home 10 minutes away, or to the gas station down at the end of the street. But I take my 5-year-old grandson there very often. It's his favorite park. He loves the big fake grass hill to slide down on a cardboard. So often, though, when we go, the zip line is broken or missing. It's just it's an unusable activity for children that are 5 to 12 if they're not very tall, because it's very difficult to get that rope up to the landing or the launch zone, and then the kids can't get down off of that rope. You cannot have littler children at the lower level, because the upper level has the only swing available for a parent and a child to sit in together in one of those little baby swings, and some little metal thing that goes in a circle that a 2-year-old couldn't operate to begin with on that upper level, and a whole lot of big grassy area, and again, no bathroom facility to get a child to if they need to. And I just think splitting what you think is a child's zone, a younger child zone, and the older child zone in the way it is makes it unusable for families with multiple aged children. The tan bark in the lower level, you can't set a baby in it to play with because it gets full of splinters. But you can't send your 5-year-old to the bottom to play and keep your 2-year-old up on top because you can't visually see them down at the park. It'd be beneficial to have a mixed use of the playground equipment at the same levels. I don't know if something like the pickleball and basketball court could go up and a smaller child's lot could be placed at the bottom. But we love the park. Definitely destination, though. You hear about it a lot. So thank you very much.
Madam Mayor, I wonder if we can have staff follow up. I know there's probably Parks and Rec folks that are watching this and heard those comments. I wonder if we can have somebody follow up with the resident about Olympus Park and see if there's something that we can do. I've always wondered why we don't have public restrooms at more of our parks. There's a distinction between the passive park and the non-passive park, and that is considered a passive park.
Next speaker is Garvin Walsh, followed by Jedediah Stieber, and then Scott Campbell.
Good evening. It's Garvin Walsh from Encinitas. I was here last week to complain about the continued existence of the emergency order. I'm sure you recall. At the end of that presentation, in response to a question from Mr. Kranz, the city manager explained that excuse me, the governor's order, emergency order, had not expired, and that the city's emergency order would expire 60 days after his. I didn't have the opportunity to speak then, but it was my recollection that the governor's order expired on March 31. So I wondered about that, and I went and verified that. I also reached out to the city manager asking for ask her to point me in the direction of whatever legal authorization connects the governor's order with our own. The order that was passed in March of 2020 makes no reference to any such linkage. The decision is entirely, in that order at least, associated with the authority of this body. So I'm a little confused. We had some misinformation in circulation, it seems. I realize there's no dialogue to take place here tonight, but comment from any of you on the subject would be welcome to my ears. I'd also say that the whole experience makes me wonder who's in charge here. The council sat here on this subject listening to a directive from, not a directive, a description from the city manager and reacted as if it was just another ordinary comment, when in fact the authority entirely is yours and you're supposed to be in charge of how that authority is exercised. Last week it kind of made me think, who's in charge here? So comment or explanation about the status of this order would be welcome to me. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jedediah Stuber, and I wanted to come here tonight to say that last Wednesday was a great night for Encinitas. Yes, the city council voted unanimously to unlawfully fire Mr. Ehlers, but what I saw was a community coming together, regardless of their political leanings, to tell this city council that they had finally gone too far. This was the city that I grew up in, one that my family has been in since 1947, the one that told you to your face that what we thought about you. Last Wednesday, I was proud of Encinitas. But of all the things that made me proud to be from Encinitas, there was also plenty to not be so proud of. I'm not proud that we have a mayor who believes in censorship and deleting comments. I'm not proud that it takes a cease and desist letter from a lawyer to change her mind about censorship, or that she still believed in censorship until she received a second cease and desist letter. I'm not proud that Joy is following in her mentor's path by doing the same thing only days after the mayor received her first letter. But I have a serious question. How did we get here? How did we get to a point where we have a city council that continuously fails to listen to the public? How did we get to a point where the mayor tells us that we were, quote, not allowed to clap, end quote, to only allowing Mr. Ehlers 2 minutes to state his case? It was a disgusting display of a tyrannical mayor backed by a cowardly city council who prioritizes that mayor's rise in politics over the town that elected most of you. A city council that has someone like Tony who proved that he has no guts when he said, quote, as the one in a 4-to-1 vote, that is never any fun, end quote. To Joe, who spoke for over 5 minutes and didn't say anything of any importance outside of, quote, we can agree that we all love our city, end quote. That last one stuck out to me as the main issue with this city council. And that is this belief by the city council and our mayor that it is you who determines the path forward for our town. That you 5 are the only opinions that matter. That just because you sit up there, that some sort of gift has been bestowed upon you, and you are now more important than anyone else in this community. But the reality should be that when you sit up there, it no longer is our town, because your job is to be the voice of the people. I said it last week, and I will say it again. You work for us. We do not work for you. We tell you the path forward for our town. We are tired of hearing you speak and not represent what this community wants. I was happy to see, though, that you did finally address the fraudulent charges by your board at Sandag. However, I was disheartened to see that all you did was push the blame. You are the chairperson of Sandag. Much like being the mayor, everything that happens you are responsible for. So either you don't understand what leadership is, or you are incapable of being a leader. Thank you.
Next speaker is Scott Campbell, followed by Carol Green, and then Randall Sims.
It's so much calmer than last weekend. This is great. What do the citizens of Encinitas want? We want to be left alone. We do not want to hear from our friends and relatives and people and coworkers out of state. Oh, I saw Encinitas was in the news again. It's not fun. It's embarrassing. It happens too often. The city council seems always ready to pounce on defenseless opponents. Things like balloons and straws, and most recently, catalytic converters. These are lightweight issues that can't fight back. I want the city council and our city attorney to stand up to big bad wolf Bonta and his unconstitutional state mandates and let him huff and puff and try to blow our city down. I like the concepts of data-driven. The previous speakers about the water and the reclamation, that's probably gonna be really important. I wish I could participate. I'm on septic. Maybe that could be a priority, that the city could get all the residents on actual sewage instead of septic tanks, instead of some of these other pet projects. Simple economics, supply and demand, we all took this. If you make something nice, people want more of it. If people want more of it, it costs more money. This is a huge part of this housing crisis. But what if nobody wanted to come to Encinitas? Make it crummy. That's how we can get the cost down. That's not gonna happen, is it? It's not realistic. On January 19th at council meeting, there was a motion to join this, our neighborhood voices. Yeah, it's probably a hokey thing, but the concept is not hokey. There's a current lawsuit by the cities of Redondo Beach, Torrance, Carson, and Whittier suing the state about these unconstitutional mandates, and I urge our city to join this. Yes, it costs money. All these other initiatives and studies cost money too. I think the cities really, our city residents really want you to do this. It should be investigated. Just don't say no because it costs money. Do something. There are other factors at play here. There are large corporations in our area, Qualcomm, Viasat, Life Technology. They have high-paying jobs, and they recruit from people out of state. Guess what? They want to live in Encinitas too. 200 or 300 years ago, there was this talk of 40 acres. Those people all had to move away. I had to move here from another city. It was too expensive. My wife did. I know dozens of people from Del Mar that moved here. It was too expensive. It's not just families and friends. High density needs jobs. Maybe the city can use the El Camino corridor to provide biotech jobs like some of our other areas, or even an entertainment district. I'm out of time. Thank you.
Carol Green. Carol Green will be followed by Randall Sims, and then Kelly McCormick.
Hi, good evening. My name is Carol Green. I'm here in my official capacity as the president of the California State PTA. I'm also a San Diego County native and happy to be here. I want to share with you that the California State PTA has taken a support position on AB 1690. And to give you a quick update on this, earlier this month it passed out of the Health Assembly Committee and is moving on. And Solana Beach has taken a position of support on this. So why am I here in Encinitas talking about a bill in California? It's because this bill bans the sale of tobacco filters and single-use cigar, nicotine, and cannabis electronic vapes. This will benefit the environment, it will benefit our children's health, and it will benefit all the cities in California. As a coastal city and as a city very much in favor of environmental issues, I urge you to support this. These filters are a public and environmental health crisis, and this bill keeps Californians healthy and cleans up the environment and our planet at a critical tipping point. Toxic chemicals found in electronic vapes seep into our fragile ecosystem, all while damaging individuals' health with hazardous smoke. This proposal will create a safer, cleaner world by eliminating the problem of cigarette and marijuana waste, and by preventing emerging waste sources of single-use vape products from presenting serious environmental problems in the future. I'm here in Encinitas because I live not far away. I care a lot, and I've told you my personal story before about how marijuana impacted my family's life. California State PTA supports AB 1690 because it will improve our environment, the health and safety of our children, and I hope that the Encinitas City Council will consider supporting it. One of the things I love about Encinitas is when I get to work with the prevention nonprofits that work in this community, and that is because the children of Encinitas and the children of the North Coastal San Diego County area are so fortunate to have people advocating on their behalf. I hope the City Council is one of those entities advocating on their behalf. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, we referred this to our Environmental Commission some time ago. I wonder if we can get either a status of where they're at or have this back to us. I'd like to move to support this. I believe our Assembly member is also a co-author of this bill, and so I'd love to be able to support this. And thank you so much for being here.
It's me, right? Randall Sims? Okay, awesome. Greetings, City Council and honorable council members. I want to thank you and thank my fellow citizens as well for allowing me this time to speak here. Happy 420. This day, April 20th, marks the National Cannabis Appreciation Day. This is a special year as well, April 20th, 2022, because this year the City of Encinitas will finally be establishing a framework for citizens of Encinitas to purchase their medicine within the city limits. Now, I use this term medicine due to the significant amount of research done worldwide that shows that the constituents of the cannabis plant, when taken in the correct manner, improves homeostasis in the human body. Now, the word homeostasis is defined as a state of steady internal conditions maintained by living organisms. And there exists a specific set of nerves in our central and peripheral nervous systems whose primary function is to regulate homeostasis in our bodies. The set of nerves is called the endocannabinoid system, and the primary cannabinoid receptor type 1, which is located at the presynaptic neuron in these types of nerves, is activated by cannabinoids which exist naturally in our bodies. Cannabinoids also exist in the cannabis plant, hence its scientific name. The cannabis plant has over 100 different cannabinoids that can help regulate our body's reactions to stimuli both mentally and physically. The most well-known cannabinoid and the one with the most controversial reputation is THC. This is the only cannabinoid out of more than 100 that has a psychoactive effect on humans' nervous system. Now, the way THC reacts with the other cannabinoids and the genetic makeup of the subject determines the psychoactive effect of THC. It can lead to positive results such as anxiety and depression management. Just like other over-the-counter drugs, taking too much THC can also lead to negative results in humans, such as the ones mentioned by the gentleman earlier. Another well-known cannabinoid of the hundreds present in the cannabis plant is cannabidiol, or CBD. The CBD's ability to improve homeostasis by alleviating pain and reducing inflammation are among a host of well-known effects that it has on the human body. What's not as well known is the large body of research that shows that in order for CBD to work well, it needs at least trace amounts of other cannabinoids present. The amount of anecdotal evidence out there is also overwhelming. Even my parents who live in Texas bring back cannabis-based CBD, which they buy legally in California because they say the hemp-based product does not work well like cannabis-based CBD does. My parents are in their 80s and never smoked pot, but in the past 3 years, cannabis has changed their quality of life for the better immensely. It's important that citizens have the option to buy cannabis legally in Encinitas, and we shouldn't be punished for buying legally through exorbitant taxes. Encinitas will already receive sales tax from retail cannabis sales, so please do not add any extra municipal business tax to the retail sale of cannabis. It will drive patients to purchase untaxed, untested products on the black market, which we do not want happening in our city. Thank you for your time. Happy 420 to all of you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. My name is Kelly McCormick. I'm a parent and a public health educator, and I would like to share part of an editorial by Robert Gebelhoff, an opinion writer for the Washington Post. It was also reprinted in the UT today, entitled "Teen Overdose Deaths Are Surging to New Heights. Where is the outrage?" It says in part, teens now make up the fastest growing age cohort for overdose deaths in the United States. Take a moment and think about what that says about this country, and consider that without a fundamental rethinking of drug policies, this problem will only get worse. In the first 6 months of last year, about 1,150 adolescents aged 14 to 18 died of drug overdoses, according to research published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, more than double the death toll in 2019. This is a small portion of the more than 100,000 Americans who died of overdoses in the first half of last year. But the surge is horrifying nonetheless. The Post goes on to say, the reason is clear. Drugs are becoming more and more dangerous. As fentanyl, a synthetic opioid, has contaminated America's illicit drug supply, drug experimentation has become exponentially riskier. This means teenagers, like older drug users, don't need to become addicted to opioids to suffer an overdose. Adding, parents should be screaming from the rooftops about this, end quote. I and many other parents have been screaming from the rooftops about this, but it often feels like few people in leadership positions are listening. Teenagers do not start out by experimenting with hard drugs. They start with marijuana. Policies which allow the commercial marijuana industry to lure kids with candy-flavored products and ad campaigns clearly aimed at the youth demographic are contributing to the problem. If we are to be successful in fighting this problem, we must focus more on drug use prevention. I respectfully ask that you add a ban on flavored marijuana products to the ban on flavored tobacco. Thank you.
Mayor, that does conclude oral communications.
Okay, thank you very much for the oral communications today. Now we are moving on to our report from closed session.
Madam Mayor, there was no closed session, and we have no report on closed session.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any changes to the agenda?
No changes to the posted agenda, and then moving to the consent calendar, I have no items removed by the public.
Okay, I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
I'll second.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, thank you. We're now on to action item 10A, discussion and direction on Vision Zero action plan. So we will turn it over to our mobility coordinator, Lorber. Mr. Lorber is a new to the, relatively new to the city.
Relatively new, long-time property owner, 38 years.
Oh, great.
When this was a Mayfair market at one time.
Yes, well, welcome.
Thank you. Well, good evening, Mayor. Good evening, members of the City Council. My name is Jack Lorbeer, and I am a senior planner and the new mobility coordinator with the city. And really excited about it so far in my first 5 months. So I'm here tonight to present to you the latest on what is called Vision Zero, which is a process of getting to a target that meets, as the name states, 0 fatalities and 0 serious injuries, which we'll get to in just a moment. I have a brief presentation tonight on kind of the latest items that have been going on, as well as some critical data that I'd like to share with you on some of the statistical data that we have just received recently. And then at the conclusion, staff would like the council to provide us with some direction on one of the next important items, which is what's called the Vision Zero Action Plan. This Vision Zero Action Plan was contained in the resolution from last September that was provided direction to staff. So let's get right into the Vision Zero presentation. First off, I'd just like to kind of briefly remind the council what is Vision Zero. There is a national definition that comes out of a Vision Zero network made up of a lot of different Vision Zero cities that have, just like Encinitas, defined themselves as a Vision Zero city. And what it is Vision Zero is a data-driven strategy to eliminate all traffic fatalities and severe injuries while increasing safe, healthy, equitable mobility for all. And there's some key words that I like to emphasize in there. One is data-driven, and we're going to go over some of that critical data, as I mentioned here in just a moment. But there's also many other benefits just besides the safety and the numerical kind of statistical data. As it says in the definition, you have the words healthy and you have the words equitable. So those are very important kind of concepts that sometimes get lost in the Vision Zero process, but something that we certainly want to keep going on in terms of developing it. Second of all, Vision Zero is a flexible process. I wish I could just show you and hold up something and say this is Vision Zero, but it is quite flexible. There is no prototype that as this is Vision Zero. One size does not fit all. There's special and several interpretations made by different cities that call themselves Vision Zero cities. But the main goal throughout them is that they want to establish, as this council did last September, a target date to meet the goal of surviving the end of fatal and serious injury accidents, which we'll talk about here in just a moment. There are some key principles, however, in the Vision Zero process. One of them is that traffic deaths and severe injuries are preventable, and the understanding that collisions will occur, but severity can be reduced. And finally, safety is everybody's responsibility, and that's an important concept that comes out of the Vision Zero process. So let me go on to some of the data that I wanted to provide you tonight. And when you look at this graph, it kind of looks like just a bunch of numbers, but there's a lot of information within these numbers. This comes from a statewide database. We've been waiting for it for several months, and we got it at the end of February. So this comes from a statewide database on reported collisions throughout the state, of which we then called out the ones that belong to Encinitas. The time period is a 10-year period between 2010 and 2020. And as you can see, during that time, there were 21 fatalities on Encinitas streets and 120 reported serious injuries. I'm going to use the acronym of KSI so I don't every time have to say fatalities and serious injuries. So when you hear the acronym KSI, those are reported fatalities and severe injuries. So let's start with the top row there. It's very kind of informational in terms of there's been almost 3,000 collisions in the city of Encinitas streets during the 2010 to 2020 timeframe. Of these nearly 3,000, about 5% or about 1 in 20 have been reported as a KSI type collision. When you break it down a little farther, when you get to the auto collisions, You can see that those are the vast majority of the total collisions, almost 87.5%. But when you looked at the KSI, it's all the way down at 2.7%. Therefore, those collisions that are happening in automobiles are not being reported as KSIs. Only 1 out of 37 ends up being either a fatality or a severe injury reported. This changes, though, when we get down to our last modes of transportation, and it changes significantly. When we look at the bicycle collisions, while the total is not very high when you compare it to the total, it's only slightly over 8%. When you get to the KSI involving bike collisions, it's now up to as many as 1 in 7.5 bike collisions end up in the category of a fatality or severe injury. And then finally, when you get to the pedestrian collisions, making up only a total of about 4.5% of the total collisions, the KSIs, tragically, are 1 in 3. Therefore, over 1/3 of those collisions, from the pedestrian standpoint, end up either being a fatality or a severe injury. If you even look at the last two, I kind of did not have here, but if you look at the bicycle and pedestrian combined, they make over half of the KSIs of the total collisions that are reported as KSIs. Over 52% of KSIs are bicycles or pedestrian collisions. Here's some more data that I think is very important to kind of get an understanding with. The first one on the left side are the fatality and severe injury collisions by the years during the time frame of 2010 to 2020. There's some unique information here that I'd like to point out is if you look at the first 3 years, 2011, 2012, and 2013, there's 55 KSI reported collisions. When you look at the next 3 years, years 4, 5, and 6, that drops down to 36 KSI reported collisions. Therefore, between the first 3 years of reporting period and the next 3 years, we did see a 35% drop in KSI reported collisions. So that's a pretty significant number in terms of making progress toward the entire intent of the Vision Zero process. The final 3 years of the reporting period comes out to be about 39, so we're still kind of plateaued at that level, but even the 39 in the last 3 years of the reporting period is still 30% lower than what we had in the first 3 years. So if there is any silver lining or any positive statement to make tonight on this subject, it is that the trend has been going down over the last 10 years. To look at the pie chart on the right is very interesting as well in terms of the information that it provides. But one thing I wanted to note is if you look at several of the causes of the KSI collisions, for example, you see DUI, they're at 17%. You see speeding, and you see running of signals and stops at 13% and 2% respectively. One thing that should be noted and is noted in the database is these are not the fault of, for example, Encinitas streets. These are behavioral decisions that are made. So therefore, part of the Vision Zero process is to start to begin to make an educational aspect of these types of collisions that are coming forward. I also looked in depth at what is called the hit pedestrian piece of the pie, and unfortunately, of the 19%, a significant amount of the hit pedestrians, unfortunately, were not within a crosswalk. They were people who were outside of a crosswalk and therefore were probably not even understood that they were crossing the street and therefore became a KSI because of the fact that they weren't in a crosswalk. Next, I wanted to show you quickly here, this is the locations within the city of the KSI reported collisions. As you can see, there are mainly a cluster along the 101 corridor, And the other kind of primary number of KSIs are located on the arterial system, whether it be Encinitas Boulevard, El Camino Real, some on Leucadia Boulevard, and lesser amounts on Manchester and some on La Costa. Kind of to be understood because that is where obviously the largest numbers of vehicular, bicycle, and pedestrian travel occurs, and therefore they are more susceptible to having types of collisions. So what does Vision Zero then focus on? You'll often hear the term the 5 E's of Vision Zero. Those 5 E's involve engineering or redesigning our streets to make them more safe and more accessible. Education, as I talked about, there was many of the causes of KSIs were behavior-based. Enforcement, talking once again about data-driven traffic enforcement. Emergency services, their provision of collision and their ability to get to collision sites as quick as possible. And the evaluation, that's reducing speed limits and prioritizing safety. That constantly goes on through our engineering department in terms of that evaluation. Really quick here, this is just some previous items that have been done along Vision Zero, goes all the way back to 2019. Also includes the resolution passed by the council in September. And then the data that I've just gone over with you comes out of what's called the Local Roadway Safety Plan, which I believe will be coming to you quite soon. But certainly there's an overlap and value to that data we've seen tonight for the Vision Zero process. Last couple slides I wanted to, in this section, just show Vision Zero is ongoing. It's not static. It doesn't start and then it doesn't stop. It's ongoing evaluation and ongoing investment in what we're doing as part of this process. I want to go through just a couple examples really quick here. This is the 101 and D, what's called a Scramble Crosswalk. This is a very important Vision Zero type project because it deals first of all with pedestrians. And what it does is it allows pedestrians their own phase of the traffic signal so that they can cross the street and they can cross it in either direction they so choose. It also has vehicles in a stopped position so they don't conflict with the pedestrians. And they also have turn movements are restricted so that nobody turns either in front of a pedestrian or behind a pedestrian. So this is a great example of a Vision Zero type project that will start to help some of those KSI locations that we saw previously. Here's a couple more. There's the 101 and G Street pedestrian crossing. As you can see, some of the features are pedestrian flashers. You have a small refuge in the center. You have a very bright crosswalk pattern that's highlighted, and you do have ADA facilities. This visibility will certainly help people avoid a very high pedestrian area in terms of not seeing pedestrians crossing the street. Another type is over here at Hillcrest and Andrew, that traffic circle. As you can see, the sight distance with the trees that would be blocking traffic in many cases there. The small traffic circle there will provide the opportunity for speeds to be reduced. It will require people to yield, therefore reducing their speed further, and provide a control feature that will help avoid collisions altogether. And then the last one I wanted to show you over on Olivenhain Road here. This is something as simple as during a resurfacing project, the lanes were narrowed by 1 foot, each of the lanes. So you could see that to replace that reduced distance, a small buffer was placed between the travel lane and the bike lane. While it's not big, it still allows a little bit of separation between the bikes and the travel lane on the right. So that's kind of the data and the things that have been going on, but what we're here tonight now is we've reached an important decision point. And what that decision point pertains to is what's, as I mentioned earlier, what's called a Vision Zero action plan. Once again, this was called out in the September 2021 resolution as direction for staff to proceed with this. So in my research of what are called Vision Zero action plans, I've come down and see there's basically two types. There's one that is a full-scale Vision Zero action plan, which is shown there on the top. And I've actually made some contact with some of the project managers who have done this type of action plan. They're primarily focused on much larger cities. Seattle, Portland, even the city of San Diego has a very full-scale Vision Zero action plan. And as I talk to these project managers, you see there on the bullet items a list of all the things that the major topics that were included. Took up to 2 years, many stakeholders, a significant amount of financial and time investment, hiring of a consultant, and then a long and winding kind of road of community visiting workshops, working groups, strategy development, prioritization. So it was a very full-scale, large process to put together a full-scale Vision Zero action plan. Another type of action plan was cities that weren't quite as large as what we've termed a focus Vision Zero action plan. And this is what staff is recommending to you that we continue on with. This has a smaller scope of work, but making sure that we continue to meet the Vision Zero goal. It is conducted by in-house staff. It's an action plan for adoption that does include the overlap, as I mentioned earlier, with the local roadway safety plan. However, during the development of either of these, we would continue the mitigation as we have been doing at high-risk accident locations. And there certainly would be a public participation plan as part of either of these action plans. And then finally, my last slide here is just some of the things that we will be doing as we move forward with this process. We certainly have, and I've had some initial contact with some of the interdepartmental staff that would be part of a Vision Zero committee. Based upon our direction, we certainly will put together a public participation plan. We need to start looking at some of the funding levels that will be necessary to meet the goal of 2028 that's been established. We do have a few other kind of administrative items to complete. One is a survey to Vision Zero Network, which will be done here very shortly. And then actually, as it says there, action plan development as well as a preparation of a annual report. So that concludes my presentation to you on this, and certainly look forward to your discussion and your direction and any questions that you may have to us.
Well, thank you for all that great information and the data. This is really exciting. And it's really interesting and great that you put it together. Thank you for dedicating time to it. And thank you to the city manager for prioritizing that. It was just a little bit ago that Councilmember Hinsey and I had it on the agenda as a council member initiated item. So this was really speedy work. We appreciate it. I see all my colleagues have their hands up, but I'd like to go to the public comments first, if that's okay. So how many public comments? 2? Okay, let's take the public comments.
Our 2 public comments are Scott Campbell, followed by Michael Von Neumann.
My name is Scott Campbell, and I think the council should accept the report as his recommendations, the reduced scale. One of the things as an earlier person brought up was a park, that it was a great idea, but it was suboptimal implementation. The data might have fixed that. And I'd like to introduce Citizens Review Board, Citizens Review Panel. It's post-project analysis. It's a very small group, and it operates under Fight Club rules, but we'll see how that goes. If we have problems with implementations and we're not investigating improved solutions, then we're actually making things worse. Next. Oh, Mr. LeBeer, that was an excellent report. Thank you very much for that. But I'm going to steal some of your stuff on here, and we're going to dive a little bit deeper. You mentioned this traffic circle. This is my pet issue. I live on this street, and I'm going to have to dispute some of your conclusions. This is actually less safe than it was before. People actually go faster now because the yield sign They don't have to stop or slow down. They just, oh, yield, and they go in, they don't see anybody, and it is quite blind. The people approaching us from the right side, you can't even see the signs, the street signs. They are perfectly placed so that they could be no more in the way of your rear view mirror. You can't even see the sign that says there's a yield. It's very difficult for large cars to negotiate this, especially if they have to do a U-turn or something. It's almost impossible. I took a poll. I took local control, and you can see my results. And by a 50% margin, people didn't like it. They just didn't like it. And you can see some of the responses. And even the people that liked it, they didn't love it. They just really didn't love it. We need to factor this in. This is a post-review process. Next slide, please. Okay, so here on the left is a KSI slide, and I zoomed in a little bit on where most of the injuries are. Right on Coast Highway, right in Leucadia. And then I added some extra data. And I wish I could overlay. I didn't have the raw data. I didn't have time. I have a day job. The short-term rentals and long-term rentals. Notice that they are all clustered in the same spot. There might be a correlation between some of these accidents and out-of-town visitors. It's quite interesting. And we're jibing. We want all these out-of-town visitors and short-term rentals. We're going to be talking about that. How's that jibe with all this housing we're going to buy? Maybe we should just convert these short-term rentals into housing. Next slide, please. On this, there was data driven in. And the other part of this, there was other and other auto. These are unknowns. 36% of the data driving this is not even known. I would not want to be responsible for making those decisions. I have that much uncertainty. We can talk about this more later. Thank you.
Gosh darn masks. Anyway, hello, good afternoon, evening. I'm Michael Von Neumann. I live in Encinitas, council, mayor, and staff. I'm in complete support of pursuing the Vision Zero action plan. It is critical to support the efforts to protect people from death and injury while using city streets. The challenge is moving from a concept to an actual plan with specific actions, a Vision Zero action plan. Staff provided two types of action plans for council to consider, a full-scale plan and a focus plan. Staff recommended the less costly, less lengthy plan, the focused action plan. I believe the city should pursue the full-scale action plan, albeit at a lower level than the city of San Diego, of course, but doing so would yield the best results and demonstrate a full commitment to eliminating fatalities and serious injuries on city streets. Regardless of which plan you adopt, there are many roadblocks to successful implementation. In fact, many cities that have adopted Vision Zero plans have seen an increase in traffic fatalities and injuries, including Los Angeles, New York, Portland, Washington, D.C., and Philadelphia. One of the strongest and institutionalized barriers to Vision Zero being effective is the over 60 years of auto-centric design, maximizing traffic speeds to reduce driver delay. In a recent Bloomberg article, Salida Reynolds, the director of the Los Angeles Department of Transportation, is quoted as saying, "You can't reduce delay by enhancing safety. They are diametrically opposed." Leah Shahum, director of the nonprofit Vision Zero Network, was quoted as saying, "We have to change the current paradigm that prioritizes speed and free-flowing traffic. Encinitas has to prioritize speed or safety, has to prioritize safety over speed and free-flowing traffic if we want to reduce deaths and injuries. We have to commit to lowering speeds and take immediate action to do that. Encinitas streets and roads are locally administered. None, including Highway 101, are state-controlled or supervised. They are city streets. Also, there is no right for any automobile to go fast in this country or in California. Please commit to lowering speeds as the first step to achieving Vision Zero goals. Thank you.
That concludes public speakers on this item.
Okay, thank you to the public speakers. So now I'll go to my colleagues. Councilmember Hinsey.
Thank you, and I echo the mayor's comments for being grateful that the city manager has brought this back to us so quickly. I'm really happy to see it and to meet you, Jack, and know that you're behind the scenes now, coordinating a lot of our mobility plans. I just had two questions before I make some comments, and one question is the statewide database that you referenced. Is that a new database, or does it just take that long for them to deliver the results of collisions in our city to us?
Councilmember Hinsey, it's basically been the time it's taken to gather it all up. It was a consulting firm that actually did it as part of the safety plan that I mentioned, so it took some time to gather all that information. So it's been around for a while, obviously going back to 2010. It does have some historical timing to it. The other part was it kind of goes in concert with another program out of the University of California that's called the mapping part that you saw that got that. So it was kind of a combined effort to get everything to go, and that's just taken some time.
I see. It would be really wonderful for our Mobility Commission to be able to review that data frequently, periodically, more than they do right now or are able to. My other question is, I assume that freeway collisions are not included in the Vision Zero data that we see.
I don't believe so, Councilmember Hinsey. It's those that are reported. Whether or not there's some CHP information in there, I did not see any of the little circles that you saw represented on I-5, for example. So I think those were excluded because the information was requested by the city, and therefore, while you did see some at the approaches, which is not uncommon at the approaches to each of the interchanges, whether it be Leucadia or Encinitas or La Costa, I do not think that the I-5 accident data is on there.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think I'm inclined to agree with our chair, Michael, who just spoke. He's the chair of the Mobility Commission, to go for the full-scale plan. But I also know that $200,000 is the extent of our general mobility budget that we are able to actually make the changes that would be recommended by this plan. So tonight, I am inclined to support the more focused version that I expect will be faster, allow us to dedicate more money to programming and to support the street projects themselves. But I'm curious to know, you're a senior level planner, and so the city has already done quite a bit of work in terms of study of our ATP and the Cross Connect, and there's a lot of study that's already been done. Are you able to incorporate those studies in our Vision Zero plan that's going forward to make recommendations?
Councilmember Hinsey, I think the answer to that is yes. As I mentioned in the presentation, we're certainly going to have some overlap with the safety plan that you're going to be seeing here very soon coming out of our engineering. The ATP, the mobility element, the MAP project, all of those in some way, shape, or form are connected to this process. So none of them are really standalone. So I think you're right on the right track that there will be contributions from all of them made into what ultimately becomes a Vision Zero action plan.
That's great to hear. So I think, in prior years, we took the action to do a Vision Zero inspired approach to designing our streets, which included a lot of the projects that you highlighted here. And I think that what we're really learning about too is the street projects are really important, but as you touched on, the behavior is also really important. We as a city have invested in partnering with the San Diego Bike Coalition to do trainings on the weekends, which have been well attended, and I've seen a lot of improved behavior by the cyclists on our road, especially the young ones. But I would like us also to consider as part of our Vision Zero plan that we continue this education for students during the school day and on their school campuses, because I think it's difficult to reach all of the students that are biking on the weekends when it's this opt-in class. And I hope that our Mobility Commission will be receiving regular updates on the progress of Vision Zero, if not every meeting, then quarterly, but as often as possible, because they really are our experts. I also really encourage us to work with Caltrans to better improve the safety around the on-ramps and off-ramps. I know we've done a lot of that already, but it seems like when the city takes the initiative to engage them and say, we want to go further, and we want to make sure that, right on red turns are managed appropriately. They are willing to work with us. So I hope that includes part of our Vision Zero plan as well. And then just to pick up something that Michael von Neumann touched on too, is that as part of the behavioral changes that we're hoping to see, I think when you mentioned that pedestrians get hit outside of crosswalks, it's really hard to avoid that, especially on some of our major arterials that don't have frequent crossings, but there are destinations on either side as neighborhoods and Maricosta College where the behavior change that's needed isn't necessarily the pedestrian going into the crosswalk, although I do recommend that, but that the speed comes down so that if they are hit on an arterial like that, the injury is less severe. So I do hope that the overall approach to bringing down speeds on our major arterials is part of our Vision Zero approach as well. So those are my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Lyons.
Yes, I'm really happy to see this item in front of us. I do want to thank our public speakers who are always generous with their time to come and give us their thoughts as well. So I want to add to what Councilmember Hinsey has said. What I'm really happy to see is some of this data. So I'm happy to see it today, and I have a feeling we're going to continue to see good data that's going to help support how we make decisions. So that's a really good step in that direction. I know that's what Vision Zero is about. I'm happy to see that the data shows that we're now 30% lower than we were 10 years ago, or maybe even less, depending on how you parse that data, on our KSI, on our serious accidents and fatalities. That alone is great information. So that leads me to say that I really think the focused approach, the number 2, is a good fit for us because I think we're a unique community and we've really been focused on improving safety for a while. I think the outcome of the study that shows the data shows that we're 30% lower now than we were 10 years ago really reinforces that we've paid attention and we're trying to do our best, but we want to do better. And so I think that makes us somewhat unique as, in comparison to other jurisdictions that have taken on this Vision Zero challenge. We already have, as has been discussed, a lot of other studies, the ATP, the mobility, the Cross Connect. We already have a lot in our archive, in our working documents we can use to guide us as we move forward and maybe identify where there's some gaps and where we need more information. I see that as a good foundation for being able to right size our effort to our community and where we're at right now, which leads me in the direction of the focused approach number 2. So I'm just sharing that with my colleagues as my thoughts. I think that the primary focus on accidents is really important, and that's really traditional for Vision Zero, so definitely a high priority. But I do think we in our Encinitas community are really supportive of citywide mobility for pedestrians, for bicycles, for vehicles, and corridors and connectivity. So even though it might not be the primary objective for Vision Zero and for the work you have ahead and for what our next steps are, I do want us to focus on what's unique to us, what we've already done as far as studies, and use that to guide us as we move forward. So in addition to some of those traditional ways we look at safety, I want us to also look at integrating the Cross Connect and the train, because it's a really important mobility feature in our community. And it might not be typically one of the checklists in a Vision Zero, a traditional Vision Zero approach, but the train and providing access across the tracks and safety for everyone who's using the train and who wants to cross the train tracks is an important component that I didn't want us to forget to include, and I don't think we would, but it wasn't specifically identified today yet. And to synthesize what we already have, all the other inputs, you kind of characterized it here in the next steps as interdepartmental committees convene, synthesize. That also includes the reports and the documents that are foundational. One thing I want to challenge us with too, and I brought it up a couple times in different ways, but we really care about our open space and our trails and our connectivity that way. We might think of it more as recreational, but I would want to challenge us to think of it in terms of alternatives to safe mobility, because sometimes when you separate users, you separate the traffic from the pedestrian, then you have the opportunity, at least in theory, and you hope to do it right, to create better safety. Now, I don't know if that would be a traditional way to look at Vision Zero, but we really do have great trails. We have some potential for connections with trails that can provide links like safe routes to school and things like that that are really important to us. That's it for my comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Yes, thank you. So I agree with both my colleagues who've spoken before me, and I would say that in addition to Councilmember Hensey's comments on reducing speed, I think that if we're seeing an increase in pedestrian fatalities and serious injuries, that I think that it may be because that people are looking to cross in certain areas where there's no crosswalk, and so I think that these long roads with no mid-block crossings, I think that should change. I don't think we should have long roads and no mid-block crossings. And Encinitas Boulevard, El Camino Real, this is like, you can go out there every day and you see where people are crossing, but the crosswalks aren't there. And so for me, Vision Zero should be about, really kind of not designing roads absent the users, but really kind of trying to design the road, with the user in mind. And not that I want to encourage anybody to be distracted, but if that's a reality, then we should be designing roads, with folks in mind and how they're using them. And if they're crossing in certain areas, don't put the crosswalk, in an area where they're not crossing. So I hope that Vision Zero is looking at that and looking at putting more mid-block crossings and more crossings where people are actually crossing. I agree with Michael von Neumann and the fact that we should actually do a much more comprehensive study and view, but I think that my opinion tonight is more of a practical one, and that I understand what we have on our CIP and I understand what our budget is, and I think that the focused, smaller kind of study that you all can do on staff, I think is better than something that could take 2 or 3 years or more and push something else off. And so I think that this will actually put us in better stead to do and will improve the condition and safety of our roads. So I'm in favor of that.
Thank you. Councilmember Kranz.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm looking forward to your continued efforts. I think that the information that you presented tonight is a great first step. I do agree that we should be working with the more expedited approach to developing the plan. And I would agree with Councilmember Hensey about the notion of engaging our mobility commission, because we do have some great commissioners on that body, and it's an excellent way to bring the public into those meetings and to have workshops, whatever the case may be, in order to make give everybody an opportunity to speak to these issues. I am surprised to see that it took so long to get the data gathered. I have the Pulse Point app on my phone, and it's been fascinating to have it for the last several years. And I do have it set to provide notifications when there are automobile accidents. And so I have a sense of just how often it's happening. And I do think that there are ways that we should be gathering data independent of any state organizations or whatever. We have the data, and that we should be having it in real time so that we can educate the community about these issues. And so it's my hope that we will augment this presentation with, I can think of a half dozen more incidents that should be reflected on that map, and it's painful to see, but I think that it's important that we have that information. So I appreciate you putting it together, but I hope we can take that next step and get it as up to date as possible.
Okay.
I'm going to be very supportive of the work that you're doing. I agree with Michael von Neumann. I want this city of Encinitas to be a slow-speed city. And I understand there have been some changes to the laws about setting speed limits, and I understand we're going to have a presentation on that coming up to see what the constraints are. But ultimately, the bottom line is that the number of fatalities and serious injuries are reduced the slower people drive. And so I think it's a very worthwhile endeavor, and I look forward to doing that over the next few years. So thank you.
Thank you. So I'll just make a few comments. So I was really happy to see the data that was presented, and I think, to me, the point of Vision Zero is that the data is then supposed to drive the investments and the CIP projects that we do. When we have places where we are having more accidents, staff needs to propose to council that we fund those projects because they're particularly unsafe. And I think the notion, too, that the road design can reduce severity of injury and accident. So instead of it being a fatality or a serious injury, it could be a glance off or a more just less severe collision or accident that doesn't have such a tremendous effect on the person, the pedestrian bicyclist who's hit. So continuing to focus on that, and it struck me that you chose a photo of a bike lane that was just paint instead of putting an example of a barrier protected bike lane where we do have bollards that are protecting people. And I think about the ones that are more major ones, but then even minor places we have, like, for example, right near Oakcrest School, where it merges on right next to Encinitas Boulevard, near the fire station, there's like a big swing out that can happen there with cars as they're coming onto Bloor from Encinitas Boulevard. And our traffic staff put bollards there to protect. I think someone was hit right there. And so those bollards, I think, are providing a visual barrier now that are really important. And so sometimes those are relatively minor projects that don't need their own CIP. But when we're looking at the data, we can make those improvements just as part of the course of how we operate. I also am really happy that we hired you and we hired this position in part because we wanted better coordination between planning, engineering, and public works. And so making sure that those connections are always made. I appreciated the multi-departmental approach that you showed in there, and I hope that you're able to actualize that, because we know decisions are made at multiple levels in the city, and there are private development projects, and they are making decisions that go through our planning department. I see our planning director here too. And then, of course, Public Works needs to maintain these bike lanes and the bollards and make sure that they're replaced when they become damaged, and all of those things need to work together. So having that greater connectivity is one of the reasons that we have hired this position. So I look forward to that being really effective. And I also just want to say, to the point about data being up to date, from my anecdotal experience of having 2 young teenagers with e-bikes, there's no question that the number of bicycle accidents is skyrocketing right now. My own kids have witnessed multiple serious accidents, broken pelvis, broken arms, concussions, and a number of much more minor ones where people just fly off the back of bicycles as they're rounding the corner and kind of looking distractedly at us in the car, and then we pull over and say hello to these kids who've just, with no helmets, flown off their bicycle into a fence or something. And so the reality that there are serious accidents that are happening that weren't captured, because I think it only goes through 2020, was that the last? Yeah, so we have 2021, 2022 that aren't on there. And then a continued focus on the education and behavior part, which I think as we have mode shift, which is one of our goals for climate reasons and mobility reasons and lifestyle reasons, as we have more people biking and walking, we will have more accidents, and our hope is that those accidents are not severe, right? So just recognizing that having more people involved, you will have 2 bicycles that get tangled up together, and that accident is much less severe probably than the 2-ton truck that hits the bicyclist. So having severity drive these decisions, I think, is foundational and what Vision Zero is based on. I just want to second the notion that I think it was Councilmember Kranz was and others, we're saying that, we need to really make sure that we continue to follow the data, that it be up to date, and that we use an approach, focus on the educational part, because that's also, critical and difficult for us as a city to do. But going into schools and that and partnering with the Bicycle Coalition is really important. So let me see if I made any other little notes I wanted to share here. So I'm going to make a motion for staff recommendation, which was to move forward with the focused approach, and it is usually my preference that we do invest in the project instead of invest in another study, because we do have a lot of studies and even safe route to school studies and things that we've done years ago that are still relevant. So so I think that moving forward with that more expedited approach is a good way to go at this point. So I have a motion.
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. So let's go ahead and vote.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for the report on that and bringing it back so quickly. Okay, we have one more item on our action list, which I think most of you are probably here for. This is item 10B, which is a follow-up city council request for staff to provide a data-driven analysis regarding short-term rentals. So this is the second data-driven analysis for tonight.
And Madam Mayor, before we see this item, I'm going to have to recuse myself from participating in tonight's discussion. And the recusal is due to an ownership interest in an Encinitas property that I have. Prior to March 2020, this property operated as a short-term rental. It's a hosted short-term rental, and there are plans to operate it again at some point in 2022. So I will not be participating in tonight's discussion or decision.
Okay, thank you. We will turn it over to staff. So we have Planner Dacey. Yes.
Thank you and good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, City Council members, and members of the public. I'm Melinda Dacey, the project planner working on the city's short-term rental program. I wanted to provide the council and the public with some quick background. Oops. With some quick background regarding the project and why we are returning to City Council this evening. City Council initiated municipal code amendments back in March of 2021 regarding the city's short-term rental permit program and regulations. A publicly noticed workshop was held in May of 2021, and based upon the public's feedback, staff brought forth municipal code amendments and requested policy direction from the City Council in October of 2021. City Council recommended that modifications be made to the ordinance, such as defining hosted and non-hosted unit, and asked staff to return to a future City Council meeting with a data-driven analysis to identify a process and means to establish a maximum number of short-term rentals within the city. City Council also directed staff to conduct further research into whether an adjoining owner or tenant provide consent for the approval of a short-term rental due to concerns raised by the public. Staff is here this evening to present the data-driven analysis to council and the research on adjoining owner consent. The recommendation staff is presenting this evening is pertaining to setting a cap and distance requirements for non-hosted units only. So staff collected data in February 28, 2022 from the resources that are currently available, which includes assessor's data, transient occupancy tax hotel reporting, EnerGov reporting, and host compliance reporting. The host compliance reporting provided data regarding the nightly rates that are charged by short-term rentals. The TOT hotel reporting forms were compiled and analyzed to determine the total number of hotels operating within the city, hotel room counts, and the average nightly rates charged by the hotels in relation to their actual room occupancy for 2021. Additionally, staff utilized and reviewed the county assessor's data to refine and determine the approximate number of residential units throughout the city. Staff determined that the residential unit data is the best source for comparison purposes, as short-term rentals are currently only permitted in single-family and duplex properties. Additionally, short-term rentals and hotels provide a means for overnight accommodations and the California Coastal Commission staff request this information often when they are reviewing proposals of local jurisdictions to place any type of cap on short-term rentals. Staff found that the whole home rentals, which are assumed to be non-hosted short-term rentals, do not provide for affordable overnight accommodations. The NRGov reporting provided data regarding the city's permitted short-term rentals, which are the permitted units, the number of units that are under review, and the host compliance reporting was used for obtaining the number of permits operating in the city without a permit. The data represented within the agenda report, table, and graph includes hosted and non-hosted, permitted and under review short-term rentals. Of the 527 permits, Leucadia hosts most of the permits, followed by Old Encinitas and Cardiff by the Sea. The short-term rental locations were also mapped into the city's geographic information system to provide visual representations of the data. Once the short-term rentals were mapped, there are clear indications that Cardiff by the Sea, Leucadia, and Old Encinitas communities have concentrations of short-term rentals, with most of the permitted units occurring west of Interstate 5. Staff then isolated the short-term rentals west of Interstate 5 in GIS and found that 79.3% of these short-term rentals occur within Cardiff by the Sea, Leucadia, and Old Encinitas. Based upon the data collected and documented support of past Coastal Commission actions regarding other jurisdictions' short-term rental ordinances, staff is recommending that the non-hosted units be limited in number citywide and west of Interstate 5. Previous public testimony received during the City Council's review of Ordinance number 2021-22 back in October found that the non-hosted units impacted the residential neighborhoods the most. As there was no personal oversight of the guests that occurred, such as when the unit was hosted. Additionally, a hosted unit does not contribute to a loss of residential housing stock, as that unit is still occupied by the owner. The data collected in February was limited to the total number of units that are hosted versus non-hosted, so the recommended cap percentages at this time are inclusive of both unit types. Staff also recommends utilizing a 200-foot buffer to limit the overconcentration of non-hosted units. The intent of this recommendation is to retain the character of the residential neighborhoods while limiting impacts to those who will live in proximity to such units. The buffer essentially places a minimum 3-parcel distance in all directions between units. This will also assist with prior complaints that the city was receiving regarding trash and vehicle parking impacts to the residential neighborhoods. Staff conducted some further research on other coastal communities throughout the state and only found that one other jurisdiction, Santa Cruz County, required adjacent owner consent to apply for a short-term rental permit if there was a shared common wall. Per city attorney's direction, staff is not recommending that the city require an adjacent owner consent or approval as a condition of permit issuance of a short-term rental permit. Issues or concerns by adjacent owners regarding an application for use of the property that is subject to private CC&Rs are civil matters that do not involve the city. Staff is also recommending that the 1-year permit expiration and renewal period be changed to 3 years from 1 year, and that a permit may be revoked for inactivity within a 12-month period. Staff is still in the process of collecting data regarding hosted versus the non-hosted units, so the cap, as previously mentioned, may change as the project moves through the process. Staff is requesting the City Council's direction on the recommendations within the staff report, and if the City Council supports the recommended actions, then the City Council is also requested to adopt the resolution to initiate local coastal program amendment, and so staff may begin work on updating the municipal code and specific plan to incorporate the recommendations. This concludes staff's presentation, and we are available to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. I just had a quick clarifying question. So if you're recommending that they not be over-concentrated and too close to each other, they would be grandfathered in if they currently are too close to each other. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. So then basically, there wouldn't be the ability for somebody to get another one that was within 3 units away from one that was existing?
For the non-hosted units, yes.
Right. Okay. So they could, a hosted unit could still go in. Okay. Okay. Do you have a clarifying question? Okay. Councilmember Lyons.
Yeah, it's kind of centered on that too. And I came into this thinking that really what we were looking at were the non-hosted short-term vacation rentals as far as the cap on number and distance from each other. Those two things were just for the non-hosted, but I thought I heard something different in your presentation. Could you just one more time clarify? Are we talking about just the non-hosted?
Our recommendation is for the non-hosted units, but because we don't have all that data yet, we don't know the approximate percentage of how many of the short-term rentals are hosted versus non-hosted. So the cap right now is showing a 3% cap based off of the combined hosted and non-hosted units, but we would continue to further refine that as we go through the process. Because if council proceeds to move forward with the recommendations this evening, we still need to go through Planning Commission and other public outreach efforts.
But we do know enough to make the statement that non-hosted impact the neighborhood the most. I heard that presented. Correct?
Yes, based on prior public testimony for the ordinance that was adopted in December, the public indicated that the non-hosted units impacted the residential neighborhoods the most.
Thank you for that clarification.
Deputy Mayor.
Can I just clarify what was just said? So the non-hosted, with regard to the cap, as you refine the data and as we know more of what's hosted or non-hosted, that the numbers may go down and therefore there's more space before that we reach the cap. That's what you're saying, right? So, all right. So the 3% is citywide cap, what you're recommending, 5% west of the 5 freeway, and whatever the number is now for these particular communities, they may be further under that when you refine the data. I would imagine it's going to go down. It's not going to go up, right? It's going to go down.
Correct.
As you take out the hosted. And so then it'll be further down. But the caps stay the same, 3% citywide, 5% west 5.5. That's your recommendation.
Yes.
All right, perfect. Thank you.
And have you had beginning conversations with Coastal Commission at all about this?
We had preliminary conversations with them to find out what kind of data they did want to see if we wanted to move down this path for placing a cap on the short-term rentals, and we do intend to continue to work with them to make sure that we are on the same page with them moving forward. Okay,
good. Yeah, the city that I followed the closest on this topic is the city of San Diego, and their cap is at 1% citywide, but 30% in the Mission Bay area. And so, but interestingly, their current number of vacation rentals is above 1%. So basically, they're going to have attrition. They don't have any more to give. And I appreciate actually the percentages that you're proposing here give a little bit more buffer room. So we're not in that circumstance. So I think I appreciate that. Let's go ahead and hear from the public speakers, and then we'll have more comments.
We have 27.
Okay, let's have 2 minutes per public speaker.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to call you 3 at a time. First is Brian Wilford, followed by Myron Carrico, followed by Chris Carrico. And just a reminder, you each have 2 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Brian Wofford. Been a resident for a long time. And I'm here to voice a concern. I'm a non-hosted Airbnb. One of the things about Encinitas, and I love Encinitas, I met my wife at this very spot in church here many years ago when I was attending my father's funeral. We raised a family. We started a business. We've been faithful to Encinitas, and Encinitas has been so great to us. In 2006, ABC TV heard about a man who lost his wife and was raising 8 children, 8 through 12, 13. Excuse me, 2 through 13. they made a show about our house. We lived in 1,100 square feet. Their garage was bunk beds for the boys, a washer, a dryer, a couch. The girls had the bedrooms. We had a great life. And then we had this big home for the kids. Right after that, Ford started giving out trucks because the show had some legs, but they had no sponsor. When they saw the 2-hour premiere of Encinitas, Ford and Sears came and said, we want this show because of Encinitas. A couple of years after that, they started giving the deeds to the homes. It was great, but I wasn't part of that group, and I'm so grateful. I mean, I'm not, but one of the ways I can keep my home is short-term, non-hosted rentals. My only concern is I have a wonderful neighbor who gets a little excited about things. All my other neighbors are great. So he makes complaints sometimes, and they're not really valid. I thank you for your time. That's my concern. Thank you.
Myron Carrico, followed by Chris Carrico, and then Nicole Montgomery.
Good evening, City Council, Mayor Blakespear. My name is Myron Carrico. My wife and I live at 1805 Parliament Road in Leucadia. First thing I want to say is thank you all for your service. It's not a very easy job. I'm going to read this so I can get it all in 2 minutes. On April 4th of this month, the California Court of Appeals ruled that the City of Manhattan Beach restrictions and ban on short-term rentals flouted California law protecting coastal access and is not legal. The 3-judge Second District Court of Appeals, in an 11-page opinion, upheld a verdict reached in 2019 in Los Angeles Superior Court that ruled against the City of Manhattan Beach. Judge Wiley wrote in the opinion, by law, public access to the beach is a California priority. In addition, the opinion noted that Manhattan Beach enacted a local coastal program, LCP, 28 years ago that was certified by the Coastal Commission. The city failed to obtain approval for changes made to the local coastal program as a result of these new ordinances. The city did this even though the Coastal Commission in 2016 explicitly mandated and required coastal cities to file amended LCPs when ordinances were changed with regard to short-term rentals. At least from what I've read, it appears the City of Encinitas has not filed an amended LCP with the Coastal Commission, nor have they filed an environmental impact study. If you pass this ordinance tonight, I believe your ordinances will place the taxpayers of Encinitas in
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Clarify, this action we're proposing tonight is the first step in LCP amendment. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So we would have a fairly lengthy process where it would go through the Planning Commission and throughout the entire process, and the ordinance wouldn't take effect until after the Coastal Commission had approved our LCP amendment request.
That's correct.
Thank you.
My name is Chris Carrico, and good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council members. I'm speaking tonight to bring light and hopefully consideration of the latest proposed ordinance changes for short-term rentals. In Leucadia, Sea Bluff was permitted and built as a beach and resort complex. Short-term rentals were promoted as part of purchasing condos in this complex. I have distributed brochures which indicate and show you when this complex was built, that this was the intent, was for short-term rentals, monthly and yearly. It was a second home for people at the time. People loved it so much, they then decided to live there full-time. So we have both short and full-time owners. If you pass the 200 feet radius, in Sea Bluff, it's approximately like 1,400 by 800 feet. You will only have, at the most, 21 rentals in that complex if you use this 200 feet radius. There are some streets that would not be able to rent at all because we're such a small area. The most we ever had, I believe, was approximately 85 rentals. Right now, we only have 55. So in itself, people have come and gone and have created their own restriction, basically, just from use. So it's how are you going to distinguish who can rent and who can't out of 21 people in that whole place? The city has said that each year we had to have a permit. Now it's for 3 years. Shoot. Okay.
Thank you for your comments, ma'am. I'm sorry it goes fast.
Next speaker is Nicole Montgomery, followed by Charles Callender, followed by Christy Clark.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council members. I speak tonight on behalf of those in the community who currently have active short-term rental permits and those that may have the need or want for one in the future. New restrictions and regulations have been imposed this year, and the feedback I have received is that it's a frustrating and tedious process, not only for those already in compliance, but for your staff who have been
Can you speak up a little bit, ma'am, and speak into the microphone?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry. That has been a frustrating and tedious process, not only for those in compliance, but for your staff who have been overwhelmed with questions and phone calls about the compliance process. We do not need any more restrictions at this time, especially when these new proposed restrictions infringe upon personal property rights, coastal access, and affordability. These new proposed restrictions also bring up more questions. Will active permit holders be grandfathered in if they pass away so their heirs can retain their assets? Will active permit holders be allowed to transfer their right to rent on a short-term basis to new owners if they sell their homes? What then happens to neighboring property rights when one person can have added value to rent and another can't? When value is added or affected by that disparity? Also, not all neighborhoods are the same, and some, such as Sea Bluff, were developed as vacation homes and have been used respectively as such since the 1970s. One of the original brochures marketing the community states Beach and Racket Club, and this is the life. We do not need new restrictions. We need to focus on enforcing what is already in place, and if more are added, it will only be harder to enforce and could encourage people to not comply with what you have already set forth. Thank you for your consideration.
Charles Callender. Charles will be followed by Christy Clark and then John Wayne.
Thank you, Council. I'm Charles Callender. I'm excited to be retiring to this area. My wife and I are in escrow on a home in Encinitas, east of the I-5. We purchased here because we love it, but also partly because we thought we would have the ability to have a short-term rental when we're out of town for personal or business reasons. This referendum before the board, it does not appear to address documented problems in the data-driven way that I see you acting on other matters here. It definitely impairs the value of property holders and does not allow the full utilization that one might expect. It definitely creates disparities between the STR permit holders and those who do not, which will become very difficult very soon. And I urge you not to adopt the referendum in its current form, and also to consider ways to soften the impact on folks who do not have a permit at this time. I do appreciate the fact that there's some headroom in the between the current ticket holders and what's being proposed. But thank you for your time.
Hello again. I think I had a visual that he was going to put up. It's just a map. Yeah, it's just a little map. Thank you. Good evening, City Council. I'm against most of the staff recommendations concerning your continued efforts to make STR rules that are costing tax dollars for its citizens, frustrations for vacationers and property owners, and bringing down the reputation of the city of Encinitas as family-friendly. Staff's selective data gathering, to begin with, the 200-foot radius between STR rentals along the west side of Highway 5. How can staff present you with 4 cities that use that rule, with the closest one is 156 miles away, then 282 miles, 306 miles, 321 miles? What happened to using California data close enough to us, like Oceanside at 12 miles, or Del Mar or Carlsbad? Is it that they don't have that rule? I'm floored that you would consider comparing STRs with hotel rooms. The brand-new hotel that Mayor Blakespear hosted the Encinitas State of the City meeting from would cost me $974 a night to stay at for a week in June. That's per night. Whereas I don't even know if I'd get 2 queen beds, could sleep 4, wouldn't have private space for myself or my family. Oops, sorry, I just lost my note. Oh no, where did they go? The graph I have only has 11 hotels on it, just from a quick look, but the average cost of a night, June 18th to the 25th, was $316 for 1 room, no kitchen, no facilities. I have no idea if they're double beds or queen beds, 1 bathroom. And if I had to have 2 rooms with a family, it'd be $632 a night. And that was just the average for those 11 hotels. My property, I get $250 a night or under. I have parking for 4 cars off-site. I have 3 bedrooms. I have the full kitchen, a game room, a front patio, a backyard. I can have a dog. I have all the utilities, and it's furnished. And I had more, but thank you.
Next speaker is John Wayne, followed by Gary Greenwald, Maria Greenwald, and then Kimberly Jackson.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Thank you for the opportunity to come speak with you this evening. My name's John Wayne. I'm a local general contractor here in town. I've been serving our community here for the last 40 years, and I've had the great opportunity to raise my family in Solana Beach for the last 20 years. And I raised 3 beautiful bouncing baby boys, and the biggest horror every year was where we were gonna go on vacation and find 2 hotel rooms. And then the thought of taking our cute little brood and getting them down there and trying to keep them under control, because boys are boys, right? So the opportunity to use a short-term rental we found was a great alternative for our family, where the kids could just be kids. We weren't paying exorbitant prices for a hotel, which has all kinds of fun fees, including resort fees and parking and others, and we could utilize that money in the local economy. So we're very much asking for you to consider continuing to allow property owners to utilize their property in the most cost-effective way and bring this product to families like ours, where we can continue. I'm a property owner. I do live in Solana Beach. I do have rentals here in town. I'm about to be an owner here in Cardiff. I'm buying that property understanding that for many years it's been a short-term rental. I'm hoping that I'm going to have that opportunity, because if I'm not able to have that opportunity, it's a financial loss for us. So please take all these things in consideration, understanding that families love to come to this town. It's a beautiful place to have the beach day, be able to have your kids, not worry about the noise, the expense, and be able to bring additional dollars into our community. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you, Madam Mayor and City Council. I'm Gary Greenwald. We would like to thank the council and staff for all their work on this issue. We add our strong support to this proposed non-owner-occupied short-term rental policy that will help address Encinitas' short-term rental congestion. Numerous and increasing numbers of communities like ours are instituting STR caps. This is not only going to increase with San Diego, now instituting a 1% cap, and the rapid growth of investor groups purchasing homes as commercial rentals. Thus, the STR problems will be increasingly pushed to cities without adequate controls. For example, 6 of our 8 neighbors are STRs on the Encinitas short-term rental viewer map. Because some of these homes are large, with up to 8 bedrooms and sleeping 17, they draw large groups. The noise, music, traffic, and number of people associated with these large groups significantly affect the quality of life in our neighborhood, especially with the overconcentration of STRs in our small immediate area. Placing limits on the overall number of STRs will help preserve our community character and charm and help improve home affordability and home availability for permanent residents and long-term renters. With current home availability a serious problem, this is an important step. Over time, the new rules will also decrease the number of areas with super high STR concentration and help protect our neighborhoods. Thank you very much.
Next speaker is Maria Greenwald. She'll be followed by Kimberly Jackson, Yulia Bushlova, and then Gabriel Earl.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you again for all your hours of service. I also strongly support your proposal tonight, as you discussed it with Ms. Lacey. We also really appreciate the focus on non-hosted units. In our experience in 11 years in Encinitas on Neptune, the non-hosted units have been a major problem. So when there's nobody local, we've had firecrackers on the patio, confetti bombs, noise, lots of parties. And because it's 17 people or 15 people for the evening, the only real purpose is an event and a party. They're not there to use our local restaurants. They're not here to support the community. They don't show up at the local library or any of our botanical events. They're here just to party. So the big unhosted homes are a problem. And yes, there have been a lot of complaints. I realize some of the speakers weren't aware that there have been a lot of complaints issued to the city over the last few years. I do want to thank you for looking again in the focus in the non-hosted units and asking them to stay at least 3 nights. We've noticed since January there have been less parties because there have been longer stays. And we're sandwiched. Both sides of us are a non-hosted rental, large 15 and 17 people places. And they've been rented every week. But now they're rented for 3 to 7 days. And it has made a significant difference to the neighborhood, and I thank you.
Honorable Mayor and council members, thank you for your service. My name is Kimberly Jackson of Vacation Rentals by Kimberly. We've been operating for 12 years. The staff found that STRs were not affordable accommodations. There's errors in their data collection. They're comparing 1 vacation rental to 1 hotel room. They didn't note that a vacation rental could have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bedrooms, a kitchen, a yard for the dogs, surfboards, boogie boards, sand toys, things that people don't have to rent. Please go back to the drawing board for Coastal Commission because they'll ask you to do this. We've been down this road before in other cities, and compare apples to apples. How are we avoiding CEQA review? Probably because this has been split into 2 issues. If it had been in 1 issue, we would have triggered a CEQA review. Is there going to be another amendment? Is there going to be a phase 3? There will be a direct result or a direct and indirect physical change in the environment due to less TOT money. We'll have less money for sand replenishment, less money for lifeguards, code enforcement, and trash removal and whatnot. So this should trigger a CEQA review, and we will be pursuing that if this makes it any further. Regarding the 200-foot between sites, yes, you mentioned you'd grandfather them in now, but what happens upon renewal? I'm hoping that you could answer that tonight. I realize you can't answer me, but maybe in your discussions we can talk about that, because we have a number of owners on Neptune, not even people I work with, but they're right next door to each other. We realize you'll get that grandfathered in immediately, but upon the permit renewal, are those people going to be allowed a permit, or is one neighbor going to get a permit and the other one is not? That's going to be a really contentious issue with your residents, I think. Thank you again for your service, and I hope that we can all work together. I wish that people like ourselves, all of us here, had been brought into this discussion with your staff, because we have a lot of good insight. We've been doing this a long time, and the comparing apples to apples thing is huge. That Coastal is going to have a problem with that. Thank you.
Next is Yulia Bushlova, followed by Gabriel Earl, Nair Sadiq, and then David Volk.
Hi, everybody. I don't own property in Encinitas, but I have friends and family members who do, and I just want to be my voice heard for having a short-term rental in Encinitas. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Gabriel Earl, and my wife and I just went into escrow on a house here in Encinitas, right up in Leucadia, 140 range. And, you know, we worked really hard to kind of a dream to live by the beach. And to be able to do that, the short-term rental on a having a second structure, and when we go out of town to be able to rent it out really helps offset the cost. As you know, it's pretty expensive to live out here. But I think just this general idea of adding these additional regulations to things like 200 feet, really, I think that we continue to look at it wrong. It's like, from what I understand, it's really a very small percentage are creating a nuisance, but we're punishing the full group. And so if we spend a little bit more effort on enforcement with fines and other areas that can continue to create revenue for the city, but also really punish the people that are causing the issue and not punish the whole, who's just trying to do the right thing. So I would just caution everybody to think about when we make regulations that we're trying to solve a problem, but we're not really pinpointing the issue. So thanks for having me here.
Good evening to everybody on the podium. My name is Nair Sadiq. I'm pretty sure you guys all have, if you guys read my email, everybody probably knows me. So my issue is totally different than the whole short-term rental issue. So I live in a property which is not a duplex, that's not an detached home. I have a property with a common area with a beach access. So the way I look at this permit that's issued to the guys next door, which again are investment people, they don't live here, and they have no links to the community. So basically one is, it's not even a permission. I did not even have the courtesy of a notice that this is gonna be a SDR next to me. So I found out after it was all said and done. And then, I thought it might be temporary, but I'm fighting for the last 1.5 year court battles with wasting money as well. So there are two things. One is, it is not, these should not be allowed on the property which is common area. It's like, I don't know how the city attorney can say that it's a liability thing as well. If people walk down the steps and have an injury, if city attorney can tell me that I have a protection against liability, I don't. They're gonna sue me as well, because when you look at the map, and I've sent you guys maps multiple times as well, so that's one issue. So to me, to get a permit on a property like mine, it has to get reconsidered, even though what she's saying is only Santa Cruz, but if it's one city, we could be the next one as well. Second is the implementation as well. So I think that might be one of the property with the most complaints, which again, I've emails since I started complaining. A year later, there were complaints before. So there's really no implementation of the code either. I mean, they are, with the previous ordinance, more than 4 violations, you should have a suspension of 1 year. I mean, there were like 10 violations. I don't even get the violation, and they get waived as well. I mean, the 2 violations I finally secured.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Next speaker is David Vogt, followed by Maria Camarino, then Chelsea Taylor, then Danny Gibble.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I strongly oppose these regulations just due to the fact that after coming out of COVID, a lot of these homeowners are requiring additional income to supplement any types of loss that may have taken place in the past 2 years. Also, our small businesses really do enjoy a lot of visitors that come to this town using short-term rentals. I think it would be a very negative impact on the town and small businesses if more stipulations were imposed. So again, I am against these proposals. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. Just wanted to say that I also urge you to reconsider your restrictions and regulations. If we could, again, like someone else said, not punish the whole group, but maybe, work on enforcing some of the nuisance properties. I think that would greatly accomplish the goal for the people that are unhappy. And this does restrict property owners as far as utilizing their properties. So thank you. I'm in support of short-term rentals.
Next speaker is Chelsea Taylor, followed by Danny Gibble, and then Anna, I'm just going to say Anna Kay. Is Chelsea here? Okay. Danny Gibble. Danny B. followed by Anna Kay, followed by Nicole Ferrari.
Hello, my name is Danny Gibble. I'm just saying I very much oppose this, and it's mostly for affordability. We grew up pretty poor, and I really wish Airbnb was a thing, because I had 3 brothers in a family, and we were really restricted by where we could go because of hotels. We couldn't afford 2 rooms. We were terrible kids. We could not stay in the same hotel room. So like when we would go places, it was very restrictive, and we actually didn't go very many places. So I really think the beach should be for everybody, and hotels are not the answer. And the Alila is great, but it is also not something that's going to be affordable to most people or hotels around here. So that's it.
Hello, my name is Anna Krashenikova. I'm a owner of Encinitas home. I have a privilege of that. And that privilege comes with a lot of responsibility. We all pay higher taxes simply because our houses are much pricier. We are as hosts, and we provide our houses for Airbnb. We are hardworking people. We're creating and sustaining jobs, hiring ideally local people because it's easier for them to respond. Local electricians, local handymen, cleaners, just because it's easier for them to come and fix our houses. When pandemic hits, a couple years ago, I started Airbnb. I fixed my house up to the highest standard of Airbnb. I was able to sustain my holistic clinic here, also located in Encinitas. I'm assuming that a lot of Airbnb hosts can share similar experience. Short-term rentals are allowing Airbnb guests to explore our beautiful city and giving them example how neighborhood looks like from inside. Some of them later buying the houses and condos in Encinitas based on that positive home-like experience hotel cannot offer. Finally, Airbnb hosts provide memorable experience for couples and families, uniting them together, making our American families more healthier, less stressful and anxious. We provide a unique opportunity for families to come, gather, shop locally, and support not only ourselves, but all the local businesses. COVID brought us huge rise in suicidal rate among young adults and depression. Gathering families back together, we create bond so much needed in our country and in our small, beautiful community. Thank you.
Hi there, my name is Nicole Ferrari, and I am in favor of short-term vacation rentals. I'm going to piggyback off my colleagues in the back and JW in specific. I grew up in a huge Italian family, and that is something very important to me. Being able to gather all together, not for the sake of a party, but to be together and love one another and experience a place like San Diego together is super important, and hotels just don't accommodate that. So I am definitely in favor of short-term vacation rentals for that reason, as well as the jobs they provide for people and the income that they provide to people that can't necessarily make that in other ways. Thank you.
Next speaker is Joseph Gary, followed by Casey Renfro, followed by Terry Matthews, and then Peter Rodriguez. Is Joseph here? Okay, Casey Renfro. Okay, Casey will be followed by Terry Matthews, and then Peter Rodriguez.
Hey, how's it going? I'm Casey Renfro. I'm in favor of short-term rentals. Grew up families, we never really stayed in hotels, always bouncing in houses because we had a lot of dogs, and hotels can only accommodate so much. That's a huge thing for me growing up, and I just have a feeling that if there is a cap that's get placed on this, that because there's only so many, that the pricing of these is going to get astronomical. And then it's going to be a whole different elite group of people that'll only be able to come in and be able to afford it, as far as that goes. I think another thing that's big that vacation rentals allows for people to experience communities, especially with how expensive San Diego is and the different coastal communities that are here. It allows them versus a hotel to understand if they are trying to buy a house or where to live, what it actually is like to live there as opposed to being in a hotel. So I think those two things are very important for understanding and how those add value to people that are trying to come here, and then for allowing access to all different parties, families to be able to stay here and not be able to afford the Alia Maria, super expensive at the hotel and enjoy the beach life. So that's where I stand. Thank you.
Terry Matthews? Okay. Peter Rodriguez? Is Peter here? Okay, how about Lori Peterball? Peterball? No? Okay, Brenda St. Pierre? Brenda will be followed by John Ritchie, followed by David Clymer.
Hello, Brenda St. Pierre, 1134 Devonshire, and I strongly oppose more regulations, but I want to express my heartfelt concern for you guys. I mean, you should not have to live next to 17, 20 people partying next to you. Everyone deserves a respectful, quiet place to live and reside, and I'm appalled that happens. And you have current regulations in place to cite those owners, to remove their permits, and just creating a whole nother wave of more rules and regulations. These people have a problem. You can fix it right now. And I just don't understand why more rules are gonna make their lives better. It's just gonna kick the can, and it just seems crazy. The other thing is, why are all these rules in place? These are the only people who have complained, and again, my heart goes out to you. You should not have to live like that. But where are the rest of the people complaining about trash and parking and noise? I think we've asked for those reports. We've never gotten them. So again, I feel like rules are being made for a fictitious problem. Restrictions are being made for a fictitious problem. You have a problem right here. You have the ability to fix it. I would strongly suggest doing that.
John Ritchie, followed by David Clymer, followed by Laura Reindell.
Hi, my name is John Ritchie. I've lived in Seabluff for 17 years. A lot of people need the income from their vacation rentals. I have a choice. I can either sell my house because I can't afford it anymore, or I can move out of it and rent it for a while until my kids are out of college, and then I can move back in and retire, which is what I wanted to do. But inflation is just killing me. It's killing everybody. And restricting the amount of rentals is going to make everything go up. And if the Alila Maria thinks that by squashing the little guy so that they can up their occupancy in their $1,000 a night hotel rooms, it's not the same people. The people that rent vacation rentals or families of 4 or 5, they can't afford to go to the hotel there and spend $1,000 for 2 people to sit in a 300 square foot room with no kitchen. They won't do that. The hotel is not going to get any more people. It's a bogus argument. The people will just go to other cities. They'll go to Solana Beach, they'll go to Carlsbad, they'll go to Oceanside, what it may be, but they're not going to go to the Leo Mary and spend that much money. It's a different clientele. It's apples and oranges. Not everybody buys Ferraris. A lot of people buy Subarus. And this is inflationary. And I tell you, we're headed for another recession, and it's going to even more people are going to require this. The U.S., the 2- and 10-year yield curve is inverted several times already in the last month. That's an 85% chance every time that's happened of a recession within 6 to 18 months. It's going to happen. You can't spend or print $15 trillion globally and not get inflation. The CPI is already 8%. Doing this type of stuff is just it's gonna ratchet it down. What do we need, 12%, 15%? When is it gonna end? Please reconsider this. Thank you.
David Clymer, followed by Peter Rodriguez.
Good evening. My name is Dana Clymer. I'm a local property manager, and I just wanted to say that I'm against the new proposed regulations for the short-term rentals. I think it'll significantly financially impact our local community on many levels. I think that the numbers are in, and the reason that short-term rentals have basically quadrupled in the last 4 and 5 years is because they work. Families really enjoy being under one roof together. Like many of the other people have said, people that have small children, people love to bring their pets, and hotels just don't accommodate that. So I think that you should seriously consider, and like a couple other people have said, not impose more regulations and just kind of use the ones that we already have in place. Thank you.
Good evening, all. It sounds like I missed a real barn burner last week, so sorry I missed that. I was going to say something completely different, but I just want to piggyback off of what Mr. Sadiq said, that this wasn't necessarily a short-term rental issue for him. It was more of a neighbor dispute for him, but you guys put pictures of his property and highlighted it as one of the problematic properties. But he's saying it's not even a short-term rental issue, it's a neighbor dispute. That sucks for us as a property management company. Also, just a side note, quick poll of the people that walked up here, 27 total. I think 2 were against, 25 were for. You guys aren't following the data again. That sucks for us too. So that's it. Thank you.
And that does conclude public speakers on this item. And then I have David Miller, Eileen Drutman, and Trevor John Wayne, who are registering opposition to the recommended action but do not wish to speak.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Kranz.
Thank you, and thank you to staff for putting this report together and the follow-up. And I appreciate all the comments. I understand that a lot of you are speaking with a financial interest in this matter, so it doesn't surprise me. And we do have a couple of speakers who have their quality of life issues that they're concerned about. So I think it's important to keep that in mind. I was a little surprised at the number of emails that talk about this issue of short-term rentals as a business matter. And what I want to mention is that the city of Encinitas has what's known as an exclusionary zoning policy, and that the way the city was developed is to have single-family residence where it was residential, and to have visitors serving commercial, which is where you had your hotels. And what has evolved as the short-term rental market has increased with Airbnb and VRBO is that we have a pretty significant blending of the visitors serving commercial properties in single-family residential zones. And I think that, many of the speakers mentioned the Coastal Commission. The Coastal Commission has blessed this, and as happened in Redondo Beach, there will be no elimination of short-term rentals here in Encinitas because we are in the coastal zone. And so I come to this conversation and this agenda item recognizing that. But with that said, I do think that a very reasonable cap has been proposed, and I am supportive of that cap. I'm supportive of the 200-foot limit because concentration over concentration does create more quality of life issues for those folks who are not in the business and are trying to live a life of that includes the enjoyment of their personal property. So I get the business aspects, and I understand that's why you come to speak to protect those interests. And I do also agree that providing more access to the beach is a very important thing. But I do note from the staff report that the numbers being considered for the caps, we haven't even reached the cap yet. So I think that it's reasonable to set the cap as discussed. A couple of things. One is that I think the arguments made by residents of Sea Bluff that their community was developed with short-term rental in mind is valid. And they already have a 1-week minimum stay, and that people that own in Sea Bluff know when they purchase their property that there was going to be short-term rental activity. So I wonder if staff can tell me whether it would make sense to carve Sea Bluff out of the caps.
Yeah, that's something that we could do.
Yeah, okay. I think that's important, but the other issue has to do with Mr. Sidar's situation. I think that, I live next door to a duplex, and the duplex yard is divided. There's a wall down the middle of the units, and there's a backyard that for each unit. His situation, I think, is unique amongst duplexes, maybe not on Neptune, but there's a single beach access from the property. And so I think it creates a unique situation, and one that I personally would prefer to protect. I recognize that the city attorney has made a recommendation, so at this particular time, I would go with that recommendation, but I do think the situation is one that we should look at very closely to see if there's a way that we can affect that, whether it's through the requirement of having some indemnification insurance or what, because he is sharing property with people that are coming in on a short-term basis, and I think, and I'm not an attorney, but it seems to me that we've issued a permit for an activity on his property that it puts him at risk. So it seems a little strange in that regard. But I am inclined to support the recommendations that have been made by staff and to move this into the next phase, which is to do the sequence analysis, to take it to the Planning Commission and go through the process of a local coastal plan amendment. So I will be making a motion. I would move that we.
And do you want to make your motion to include exclusion of Sea Bluff?
Yes.
Okay,
that
I'll
would be the
second.
one modification. Thank
I'll
you.
second your motion. Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Yes, thank you to the public for coming out tonight and giving feedback as we have been kind of working through this issue and trying to find a solution for the last several months, year or so on this issue. Thank you to Councilmember Kranz and Councilmember Lyons for having sat through meetings before to come up with some solutions. Just a couple of questions and then just comments. So the Sea Bluff, I'm in favor of that as well. But I think that the issue was distance. And so does the motion actually also not only waive the cap, but also the distance? Because that would be, I
Yes.
think, more
Yes,
of a problem. All right.
every unit there would be, we would issue a permit,
All right.
mostly for the purpose of collecting TOT.
Yeah, all right, perfect. That was one of the points that I had. And then there was a question about the renewal permits. So you have a situation, I don't know it's grandfathered, because this is not property rights. They're not rights running with one's property, but you have somebody today that has a permit and expires in a year or 3 years under this ordinance. How do we treat that permit in the future when they go to apply for a new permit? Is that an automatic, say for instance, you have, in the interim, you have a unit within 200 feet of that unit that has applied for a permit and has received a permit, and say for instance, the cap has been exceeded in that area, does that permit get automatically, is it renewed, or can it not be renewed?
We can craft some language to include grandfathering of those permits. If they were coming in for a renewal, let's say, and they didn't have any, prior code enforcement issues or revocation of their permit, then they could continue to operate.
All right. All right. I do think that let me just see. I do think, as I'm looking at my notes here, I do think that we should have this come back at least within a year of passage here, so that we can look at the measures that we've put in place previously that were really focused on impacts. And now today's, which is kind of focused on impacts and also the character of the community, I'm hoping that we can bring it back and take a look at it. I think also just from the cap perspective, if there needs to be any adjustment to the cap, because obviously today, and even when we kind of look at the numbers, it looks like that in all of the areas of the community that we're below the cap. And so that there is actual growth that can happen in the market. And so if there's a higher demand in the market, it's not as if it's being shut down because the caps, the numbers actually are lower than the cap. But I'd like to take a look at that in the future to see if that's the case in the future, and also just to kind of take the pulse of the community to see what the feedback is in terms of some of that intensity, and realizing that the intensity is much more on the west side than kind of east of the I-5 freeway. So just I'm in favor of this. I think that I've received numerous emails and complaints over the years about mostly about impacts, about trash, about loud noise, about partying, and I think that while we have been successful hence far in trying to put together measures that would allow our code enforcement to actually go after these, and actually now we're adding an additional code enforcement person who will be charged with specifically with short-term rentals. I think they're going to start making progress. But I also find important the argument about character and the fact that if you have so many of them in specific areas, that those areas that were purely residential are now kind of operating in more of a commercial kind of situation, which, as Councilmember Cran said, was not the intention. And so I think that there needs to be a balance here, and I think the cap is really, and the distance requirements is really trying to get at that that balance. And so I do think that what we've put together is a moderate step and something that we ought to be taking and look at it in a year or so to make sure that it is in fact going in the direction that we want it to go. There was one other comment. There was a gentleman here that mentioned about retirees, where they basically, are going to rent out their house for maybe one time or twice a year or something like that. They're basically traveling, going to Europe or wherever they're going, and they're able to basically rent out that house, and it actually provides some revenue in retirement, but also provides several other benefits. And I'm wondering how we could, it's obviously non-hosted because it's their house, it's whole house, and they're leaving. But it seems to me that if somebody's doing that once or twice, that it's more likely to be, it's still homeowner occupied, and it's still more likely to be kind of that character of the community, that good neighbor that exists, and kind of keeping that to the character of the community. And it's likely that there are not going to be impacts because that person lives in that house. And so I'm wondering if there's some sort of distinction that can be made. Because they can't even hire, I can't even see how that person would hire, somebody to come in become a host or something like that. So is there some sort of, I think I'm sensitive to the argument because it just sounds like, it's not necessarily the hosted situation. I mean, the non-hosted situation.
We could probably look into the definition and see if there's some kind of exception that could be included in there for that type of a situation, or if they're in agreement to only renting it for a limited amount of time.
As far as enforcement goes, because I was talking to Bryant over here, who's our code enforcement supervisor. When it comes to those types of properties, it's typically listed in the assessor's rolls as their primary residence. So we could also look at that aspect of the property if it's your primary residence that you're renting out just a couple of times, if that is of interest to look at by the council.
Yeah, I would love to have that included because I think it's reasonable, and I think that it actually, what they're doing is consistent with what we want, which is, kind of the character of the neighborhoods and also the impacts. So I will support this motion, and I hope that, I don't know if that's a friendly amendment or if it can be taken as a friendly amendment, that we would explore that type of exception and give staff just some direction to kind of explore that. And if it's something that is reasonable and you can enforce it, bring it back or include that in there.
I don't know if I really want to amend the motion on that. I want to make a number of comments, so why don't we just leave the motion as is, and then we can address this, because I have some further follow-up questions about enforcement before I want to go down that, creating those types of potential exceptions that seem like they could swallow the rule. So let's call in Councilmember Lyons first.
Right, thank you. I just want to start by saying that we really do value short-term vacation rentals. They are local business. It's true, truly local business. They contribute to the local economy, and they're important to TOT revenue. I mean, these meet many of the goals that you have and that the city has. So thank you for being here and contributing your time and reinforcing that. I do want to emphasize the point that the difference is that these businesses are in residential neighborhoods for the most part. And so that's where we need to be sensitive. In all the public input we've received over the last year plus, really the guiding principles that have led us to this point here with this information tonight is that we want to protect neighborhoods. We want to reinforce and foster quality of life. And we also want fair opportunities to make a living. So we're trying to find the right balance. I'm glad to hear that the suggestions that have been put forth so far, whether they're added to the motion. It was still to be seen, but I'm glad to hear that there are ways to think about some response to what we've heard tonight. One of my comments really, though, is we heard some response tonight because I think that our data isn't complete. I mean, we've got data missing here, and we want this to be data-driven. And I think we know we have data missing. This was a preliminary approach. So I feel like our position here tonight is to give staff direction on how to move forward as they gather the rest of the data on where are the non-hosted short-term vacation rentals and what would this mean to everyone here in the room. And then how do we respond to that? Without having all that information tonight, we can assume we might have these impacts, but we're not really sure yet. So I think this is a preliminary step. But we don't have all the data yet, and this will go through the process of being revised and evolved through staff, and then it will go through the public comment period, through the Planning Commission, and then it will go back to City Council, it goes to the Coastal Commission. There's a process. I may be missing some steps, but there's a lot of engagement still to be done. I'd like to give staff some kind of fundamental feedback tonight, and that is to finish with the data, understand where we're at. I'm interested in the escalation of pricing with caps. I mean, there's enough precedent out there of communities that have used the caps as a regulation to see if we can understand whether there is an escalation of pricing with caps. And I'm in support of the unique attributes of some of our properties, and Sea Bluff is a good example. And I'd like to kind of ask staff to look at that as far as fine-tuning solutions for when there are unique properties like Sea Bluff, which I see as more a condo, a tennis, and beach club. Clarification on selling homes and whether the rights are conveyed, I think, is really important. And two things that no one's mentioned, maybe because it's good news, I'm not sure, but the fact that the recommendation also is for it to be a 3-year permit for renewal, and that the fee is every 3 years instead of every year, which I think is a significant change, and that apparently will pencil out in recovery of costs on the fee. So that's probably good news that I wanted to mention. And I also think it's good, and no one mentioned it, so to revoke for inactivity over 12 months. So I'm in favor of those aspects of the proposal. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you to everybody who came out to speak tonight on this topic. I know that a number of you were talking about the reality, the way that you see it, and I want to share just my perspective as a policymaker for the whole city and all of its various interests. So it's important to me that we provide short-term vacation rentals to provide that type of housing for families to go on vacation, as several speakers mentioned, and to provide access to Encinitas and the beach. It's also important to me that we provide a way for families to support themselves, to stay living in Encinitas, to be able to rent out their properties if they want to be able to continue to live here and to support themselves. But it's also important to me that we provide housing for people who are living here full-time, and that we not be losing housing out the back by having an ever-escalating number of homes, especially affordable homes, be converted into short-term vacation rentals or hotel rooms for people who are visitors. Because I think ultimately communities are built by the people who live there all the time, who work there, who are contributing, who are creating neighborhoods. And so we need to be able to balance all those interests. And it's also important just to recognize the importance of, like, what does it mean to have a neighborhood environment? I mean, having a neighborhood means having neighbors who you see routinely and you comment on their pets and their flowers that they're growing and the weather, and you have some type of a neighborhood feel, and that's created by having people who are there all the time. So there is a difference, even if they're not creating code complaints. Just having a perpetual stream of visitors is different than having neighbors. And so I think that the staff seems to have really come up with a great solution with 3% cap and then a 5% cap for these coastal communities. The question of whether that will drive up costs over time, as Councilmember Lyons mentioned, is a potential problem. But to me, the bigger problem is that the bigger thing we're solving for is to keep our housing stock. So we go through a lot of effort in this city to create housing elements, housing plans, to preserve affordable housing, to build affordable housing. And so to have that be converted into vacation rentals without a cap, I think is a problem. So I'm really happy to see this, and I think that it does address a problem that we would have brewing on the horizon if we don't already. And I'm so glad that you were able to turn this around so quickly and bring it back to us. So a couple things to the point that Councilmember Mosca was making about having an exception or something. I think that I could support something like that if it had a clear cap, like 4 weeks or something. Someone's going to Europe for 4 weeks, or they're going on two-week trips, but not to have it be something that's amorphous or difficult to enforce, and it ends up, like I said, swallowing the rule. So we have people who say, well, I live there for 3 months a year, and then I rent it for 9 months, and I'm claiming it as my full-time property, but, you know, because there are a lot of different living arrangements people have, to have multiple homes, to stay in multiple places, and I think we don't want to have that exception swallow the rule. So if you want to take this to the Planning Commission and work through it, what can you enforce? Because that's one of the things that's so important from our perspective. We can say, let's just do it this way, but it's really important that we figure out what you can enforce. So I would just, my perspective is that we should ask you to come back to deal with that. I think it is a good point that people are living there full time. They are creating neighborhoods, and if it's a shorter period, that maybe it is in a different category. So I'm willing to think about it, but I also I don't want to direct it as part of the motion. My preference would be that we just give it to you so that you could have it be part of the mix. So the question of whether someone can inherit or sell their vacation rental, what is the current way that this has been drafted? My presumption is that it can't be. If someone dies and the home is sold, or it's inherited, or they sell the property, that it doesn't run with the land.
That's correct. The permits are non-transferable from owner to owner, place to place.
Okay. I think that's probably a good idea. I mean, in terms of trying to allow the market to have new people enter it, and to not have these become the gold medallion kind of thing that is worth so much and passed along, and kind of entrenching that kind of whatever privilege is created by having one of these permits, because it is possible that they will become quite valuable as we do hit that cap. I very much appreciate and like the 200-foot radius. I think that's a great thing, because we don't want to have them concentrated all together. So I'm glad that that was in there. I'm also glad we don't have caps on the non-owner occupied. So we don't have caps on the owner occupied. So that does provide the opportunity for a lot of different living arrangements if people are still living in the house and they need to make a little bit of extra money. And I also think it's important to note that people do make money by renting to long-term tenants. So, you know, renting for 30 days or more is completely unaffected by this. So you're just renting your home, and you can do that and make money and not pay TOT tax if it's 30 days or more, because then you're just, you know, it's just a renter, a regular renter. And the city is essentially not involved in that transaction. So let's see, I think that was, oh yeah, and then it was good to hear a little bit of feedback that the 3-night minimum is making a difference. So I appreciated coming forward today to say that, because that, you know, we hoped that would make a difference. And one of the main things driving this was the concern that we were hearing perpetually about neighborhood complaints. So I'm happy to hear that feedback. So I think those are all my comments. I see Councilmember Grants has put his hand back up, so go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to just follow up some of your comments there. I think that the right approach is to work on that definition of owner-occupied, you know, hosted, because of the situation that was described, where maybe 2 or 3 months a year they're gone. Maybe that one isn't capped because it's part of the other group. So maybe working through the Planning Commission on better defining those terms will be helpful. And I want to make clear that a couple things. One, I do believe there's a place for short-term rentals in our community, and I want to, make sure that's clear. I also want to say that I'm not, gonna, wipe my hands of whatever decision we may come up with as it works its way through the local coastal plan amendment process. If there are additional data that we receive that, I think it's datum, but, we're, I think, a group of people that is willing to revisit the issue, and so I'm not interested in doing anything that's going to be detrimental to encouraging people to come visit our community. But I also, as the mayor has pointed out, there are some other issues that are really important, and so to try and find that balance is very important to me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So do you have any other, does Steph have any other questions? Or we can go ahead and vote on the motion. Yes, Roy? No? Okay.
No questions.
Can you give just a timeline of when you think this potentially could be effectuated once it's gone through the Planning Commission, Public Feedback, Coastal Commission process?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Our hope is to go before the Planning Commission sometime in the fall, and then to the City Council, hopefully the following winter of this year, and then depending on where that goes, then we'll submit to the Coastal Commission, hopefully early next year.
Okay. All right, that's longer than I was hoping, but that's it. If that's what it needs to be, that's what it needs to be. Okay. And then also, there are a number of people who mentioned the perspective of regulatory burden, that this is more burden. But the reality of having to get a permit every 3 years instead of every one is the reduction of regulatory burden. So that's really, I mean, creating more efficiencies for people and for the city, right, to process permits once every 3 years.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if I could add on, in terms of the timeline, the main reason for the delay is the CEQA process. And that's the piece that we had to do some additional analysis. As one of the speakers raised tonight, is that is a critical piece that's part of our evaluation. So.
And is CEQA before Planning Commission?
That's correct.
It is, okay.
Yep.
Okay, great. Okay, let's go ahead and vote.
Before we vote, Mayor, if you don't mind, I just want to, for the minutes, I want to make sure I have all the recommendations correct. So the motion is to approve the following recommendations to regulate short-term rental permits for non-hosted units only. Number 1 is a citywide cap of 3%, Sea Bluff excluded. Number 2 is community cap of 5% west of the I-5, Sea Bluff excluded. Number 3 is a distance, new permit requests have a minimum distance of 200-foot radius between short-term rentals for short-term rentals west of I-5, Sea Bluff excluded. Number 4 is to change the 1-year permit expiration and renewal period to 3 years, and also include that a permit may be revoked for inactivity for 12 months. And then to adopt Resolution 2022 or 2238, titled "A Resolution of the City Council of the City of Encinitas, California, initiating amendments to the municipal code, specific plans, and local coastal program pertaining to short-term rental regulations."
That sounds like the exact same motion I made.
That's what I was hoping. And staff for non-hosted, and that's correct, staff? Just make sure, okay. Great, thank you.
Yes, and then also just one more comment. I think it's important we continue to follow up on the enforcement. I know that there's no benefit the city gets from having unpermitted vacation rentals. So making sure that not only do we not have bad actors who are violating the code when it comes to noise and trash and such, but also that we capture all of the ones who are renting and make sure they're paying TOT and registering. Yeah. Okay, let's go ahead and vote.
And the motion does carry unanimously, and noting that Councilmember Hinsey is absent due to a recusal.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, I think we should push through, Council. Are you okay? We just have one further item, information item. Thank you, everybody. We're going to move on to our last item of the night, which is a Development Services Department overview, which we're very excited about. I don't know. It will be up to her if she wants to, I guess. Yes, let's just go ahead and get started.
Madam Mayor and members of the council, tonight we're bringing back to you a item to give an overview of development services and our department overview. And I'd just like to bring to your attention that tonight we have the entire management team of development services supporting our director, and he will give an overview of what we like to refer to as past, present, and future. So without further ado, Roy Sapow.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Honorable Mayor, council members. My name is Roy Sapow. I am the Director of Development Services. As the city manager indicated, tonight with me, we have our leadership team as well as some of our staff members. In addition, we also have some of our team members from other departments, including our IT folks and others that are critical to our success as a city team. That it's important that we collaborate with other folks in our organization. I've been the director for 10 months now, and I'm excited to provide the overview tonight of our Development Services Department. As the director, and after being here for close to 22 years now, as Pam always tells me that I've been here before the dawn of time. So, but I am, I've seen a lot of amazing things. I've seen a lot of great things in this community. I've also seen some not so great things, and I'll touch on that later on in the presentation. I am very excited to be where I'm at now in my career. Here with the city of Encinitas for three reasons. One, we have a very supportive city council and a very supportive city manager, so that's one. Number two, we have a very engaged and passionate community. That's very important. And just as important, we have a professional staff that is very passionate and committed to the service, to their service to this community. So those are the main reasons why I'm really excited, and I am very committed to where I'm at in my career. So this is an overview of the presentation. As Pam indicated, I'm going to talk about where we've been, where we are today, and then where we're going. What is our future? So before I start talking about our department structure, it's important that I indicate this, to share this with you and provide some perspective. As a government agency and as a department, we're in the people business. What we do and the service that we provide are rooted in conflict. And what do I mean by that? For two things. One, because of rules and regulations, that we are in a position to tell somebody, a property owner or a business owner, that they can't do what they want to do. So that's one. Number two, we're in a position because of rules and regulations that we're going to tell a property owner or a business owner or a customer that they owe us something. They either owe us money or they have to give up portions of their property. And that's our reality. Those are the challenges that we face on a daily basis. With that in mind, we as a department, with the city manager's leadership, it is our ultimate goal to convert those conflicts to get to a yes. Our goal is to help our customers navigate the state and local regulations and to help them get through the red tapes and to get through the finish line safely and timely. So this is our organization structure. We currently have 54 employees and within 5 divisions. Before I touch on the 5 different divisions, I want to share a little bit of history of the assistant director position, which is my prior position. When I was the assistant director, I just realized that in that role, I was assisting the director at the time with the normal day-to-day operation, but also I facilitated dispute resolutions, where when we get complaints, that is where I intervene and work with our staff to find solutions. Unfortunately, where I'm at was as the director, I'm realizing that I'm doing both jobs, and it's not feasible, it's not sustainable. So what I'm requesting through the city manager is to reinstate that position, whether it's part of this current budget or we will bring something forward in the future budget for that main position. So the 5 different divisions we have, I'm going to start with the development, planning, and code enforcement. Just the name state, that is where all of our discretionary permits go through. If somebody wants to propose a variance or a subdivision, a coastal permit for a new home, those permits, all the planning permits go through that division. Code enforcement, that is where our code enforcement team live. We have Bryant, our code enforcement supervisor, here with us tonight, and they handle all of our code enforcement cases. As you're all aware, our code enforcement is a reactive code enforcement, and that is prescribed in our code. Our policy planning and housing, that is where all of our policy projects live. You saw 2 of those projects here tonight. We had the STR ordinance. We also had the Vision Zero. All those policy documents and projects, those projects live in this division, including our housing element as well as our mobility element update. All those projects live within this division. The next division is our land development and building. That is where all the building permits go through, all the regulatory permits go through. Then also our counter services. Our development engineering team is the new addition to our team as part of the 2017 reorg. This is the land development team, the engineers that focus primarily on private development. And in our operations and engagement, this is a new division that we created in 2020 as part of the 2020 reorg. The reason we created it is because of the emphasis on engagement, how important public engagement is. And that is why we created the Division of Operations and Engagement. And that is where our citizen participation program lives. And that, as you're all aware, that is the program that requires developers or applicants, including the city, to conduct these public meetings early on in the process before we get too far down the road and then we get hit with last minute major issues that, it's very difficult to handle in the 11th hour. So our group consists of diverse group of professionals with different backgrounds and experiences. As you can see on the pie chart, close to 70% of our staff currently have less than 5-year experience with the city. And that's an important piece of information that I'll touch on a little later on in the presentation. Now that you know who we are, this is what we do. This is the work that we do in a high level. This is the different levels of permits that we handle, the different types of permit, provide some timelines on when applicants should expect a decision, as well as our staff timelines. I just want to note that these staff timelines are predicated not just with what we have control over in development services, but also we have outside agencies and outside departments that are part of the planning process that we have no control over. However, it's important that we work closely with those departments and outside agencies, for example, the Coastal Commission or the Department of Alcoholic Beverage Control. Those are out in the wildlife agencies. Those are outside agencies that influence and impact our timelines and decisions. So now that we've talked about who we are, next we're going to talk briefly about some of the changes that occurred in our department in the past years that have impacted and influenced where we are today. So these are some of the key changes in our department in the past several years that have impacted how we provide and the level of service and how we provide service. Number one, we've had 10 directors in 10 years. That's a big change for not only the community, but for staff. That includes interim directors in 10 years. Second, we reduced numbers of our engineering staff in 2017 as part of the 2017 reorganization. Through that change, it forced us to increase our reliance on contract services. And we can talk a little bit about that, but the downfall of that is onboarding contract services, the turnover within the contract services is high. So we're constantly having to train new people to onboard and adjust to our system in terms of our codes and our policies. We've lost 30% of our staff in the last 2 years with an average experience with the city of 10 plus years. That's a significant impact to our staff in terms of the institutional knowledge that we lost in the last 2 years for the reasons that's stated in the PowerPoint. Also, in the last couple of years, we began the implementation of our permit software system. And I'll talk a little bit about that in our next slide. And we have our IT team who has been instrumental in the implementation of that program. Implementing the new permit software was a major heavy lifting. It's a Herculean effort. And these are the critical deliverable related to the Development Services Department. As you can see, it wasn't until 2020 when the most critical things occurred, including the opportunity for applicants to submit applications through the customer service portal. This was a huge success in many levels. It reduced our carbon footprint with less paper and less vehicle trips to City Hall. But while our electronic submittal was a success, later you'll see the number of touch points and contacts with customers increased. This next slide shows the history of total new permits, of all permits that come across our counter. That includes grading permits, building permits, planning permits, and regulatory permits. Regulatory permits include short-term rental permits, business registrations, all the permits that we manage in our department. As you can see, in 2018, it was close to about 429 permits total. And in 2021, we were at 4,000, a little over 4,000 permits. We have the data that for 2022 till the end of March of 2022. With that data, if we project that data and extend it to the rest of the year, we project that the total permits for 2022 will be 4,000, close to 4,900 permits. And the box to the upper right-hand corner is the valuations of permits, of building permits that come through our counter. Valuations are the value of labor and materials that are associated with permits that are coming over through our building permits section. In 2018, there was close to 37 million valuation. That number more than double in 2019 and 2020. And 2021 is our banner year, because you'll notice there's $366 million. These are investment in our community. These are the money that is being invested back into our community through construction, through development. Currently, we're at 48 million, close to $49 million in 2022. If the trend continues based on those numbers, we're looking at probably between 125 to 100 million to $150 million investment in our community, valuations of permits. I talked a little bit earlier about touch points. What I mean by touch points is the contacts that we make with customers, whether it's through phone calls, emails, visiting at the counter. We have virtual assistants now, meaning we have meetings through Zooms and Teams. In 2018, there was roughly 13,600 touch points with customers. And so far in 2022, as of the end of March, we've had 6,200 touch points. If we project that and continue that trend for the rest of the year, we estimate that up to 24,000 contacts, touch points, by the end of this year. And that's close to almost double what we were handling in 2018. These charts putting the focus now on our discretionary permits. These are our planning permits, CDPs, coastal permits, variances, and these are the projects that requires a public hearing or a director's decision. In 2018, we received 144 new applications, new permits. Well, you'll see the trend is that it doubled came 2021 at 289 permits. Based on the numbers that we have so far for 2022, if that trend continues, that we estimate that we will be receiving a total of 364 permits, new permits. On the right is a graph that shows the number of staff that are designated to work on these discretionary permits and the total number of applications per planner. In 2018, the average was 24 applications per planner. And due to the increased volume of applications we received over the years, that doubled when we got to 2021 at 48 projects per planner. I want to share with you that the industry standard is 15 to 20 projects per planner. And that is consistent with what I'm hearing from my colleagues in our neighboring cities. And the total number of planners that have been designated we've been consistently having 6 planners designated to work on these discretionary permits. So now I will share with you some of the history. And through those experiences, we've identified some of the impediments that really affect our process and our timelines. So number one, the constant change in state regulations. Number two, local initiatives. A good example is the cannabis measure. That generated a high volume of work for our staff. We had to refocus and reallocate, reassign some of our staff to work on some of these local initiatives and away from other priorities. As I indicated, we had a high staff turnover. And also, I reposting or including the pie chart again to show, as I mentioned, I'm going to touch a little bit on that. And the reason being is, yes, we have new staff, and that requires onboarding, a little bit a learning curve that requires learning our municipal code, learning the new state regulations, policies on our procedures, as well as our new permit software. We talked about our increased in workload. And then also the ongoing enhancements and improvements to our permit software, and that takes time. So now we're going to talk about how are we addressing, or what have we done in the last year to address some of these impediments. First, thanks to the council and your direction, we released a customer survey earlier this month, on April 7th. We issued them to close to 17,000 applicants who have processed applications or permit through the city in the past 3 years. The survey included ranking and open-ended questions, and would like to report the results tonight. The primary question that we included was to ask the respondent, how satisfied were you with your most recent application? We received over 500 responses out of the 17,000 surveys that we released. Most of the comments that we received were both issues that were both complimentary, but also a criticism. And the survey shows that 60% of the customers were satisfied with the service, and 40% were dissatisfied with the service. And I must say, we have our work cut out for us. We have room to grow. We have room to improve. And next, I will share with you some of the trainings that we're working on, some of the process improvements that we're working on to address the comments and feedback that we received as a result of the survey. So some of the completed and ongoing improvements that we've done is the ongoing improvements to our InnoGov system, as well as our customer self-service portal. Our IT folks, they're incredible. They've been very helpful, working with Tyler and securing an account or more resources with Tyler to help us and facilitate the ongoing enhancements with InnoGov. We've also updated our applications, forms, and checklists and templates. And council, that you've shared with us some of the feedback that you received. A good example is I shared with you a hard copy of the cover sheet that we created as a result of the feedback that we received from one of our local architects, Brett Farrell. Working with him, he was able to give us some great feedback, and we received the feedback. We created the cover sheet, and we continue to work with him on getting the feedback before we could release it. And that has been very helpful, and it helps our architects and our designer and our homeowners know exactly what they need to include and submit to the city. We've also developed...
Excuse me, Director Sapau, are you
Yes.
referring to this
Yes.
particular document?
Yes, it's the 11 by 17 sheet that is included in your packet. We've also developed some frequently asked questions and guides. And I want to bring your attention to one that was also a result of feedback that we received from the public. Is the last one. It says how to start a business. This is a result of feedback that we received from the Chamber of Commerce. I met with the Chamber of Commerce about a month and a half ago. And during that meeting, one of the complaints that they raised are business owners. They received complaints from business owners complaining about the process, complaining about the planning department being an impediment to their progress with their business, with opening their businesses. So during the conversation, we learned that some of the business owners would sign leases with landlords before they come and talk to the city. And then when they come in for a business license, it's when they discover that either the use requires some planning permit that they have to go through, or the use is not permitted. So that's a struggle. So one of the feedback we received from the chamber is that You know, we have other cities, we're aware of other cities that have guides for businesses and how to start a businesses. So we work collectively with the chambers and we came up with this guide. And this guide is a roadmap for business or potential business owners to know exactly the process that they should go through and the due diligence that they have to do before they sign the dotted line. And while this is just a guide, this guide will be supplemented with a booklet. Each step within that booklet we have more details of what each step entails. So that will be available. Right now, we're still waiting for feedback from the chambers. Once we have those feedback, we will finalize and then post it on our website. The other idea with this is that we're going to have postcards. One side will be a pretty picture of Encinitas, and then the other side will be this roadmap with a QR code that business owners can quickly access the QR code, and will have at the tip of their fingers access to the detailed information so that they're informed before they sign the dotted line. Some of our ongoing improvements, and I'm really excited about these because these are pop-up events that we've attended. It's exciting, very exciting to meet the community where they are. These are some of the examples of some of the pop-up events that we've attended. We have one of our planning managers, Jennifer Gates. I've been to several of those with Melinda during the Cyclovia as well as the farmers market. We've also attended the Oktoberfest. We had a booth there. So those are some of the pop-up events we've held. I also want to bring to your attention our engineering review timelines. We are well aware of our engineers, and in January we were at 7 months, and you've received multiple complaints from applicants about the engineering timelines, and I'm excited to share that we were able to bring down our review timelines in January. We're at 7 months. And we're able to secure a contract with our consultants, and they were able to provide some engineers, close to 8 to 9 engineers that we worked with, to really get us down to 3 months, which is where we are today. So in just 2 to 3 months, we were able to cut our timeline in half. And thanks to you, the City Council, for supporting our ask for the additional engineers. So we're excited to bring those folks on board and then hopefully continue to reduce the timelines in our engineering review. We also implemented some protocols for returning phone calls and emails. One of the things we're going to implement is to require staff to schedule times on their daily schedule to return phone calls and emails. And then we're also going to update our staff advisory committee meeting protocols to require certain types of permits to have to do a staff advisory committee meeting. And that is very helpful because then it's a wonderful opportunity for applicants to meet with a different discipline, and then they hear directly what it is that they need to submit to avoid any 11th hour hits. So we talked about a lot. So this is the most exciting piece, and this is the one I want to focus on because I'm about moving forward, and our team is about moving forward and improving and progressing. And I have a wonderful team that is committed and willing to come alongside and get us to where we want to go. So number one, some of the improvements that we are working on is staffing resources. Thanks to the council, we were able to secure our 2 engineers, and with the fiscal year 2022-2023 budget, we will be able to bring on board 2 additional planners as well as 1 additional code enforcement officer. Staff training. This is the piece that's going to focus on, we're going to tailor our training based on the feedback that we received. Based on the feedback, the first thing that we're going to work on is our customer service and time management training. We're also going to focus on conflict management as well as some of the technical training for our new staff that are onboarding. And then last but definitely not least, we're going to focus on process improvements. And these are some of the trainings. I'm not going to go over it in the details, but it is part of it. It's in your packet. And these are the trainings that we have scheduled that are coming up for our staff to address the concerns and comments that we received in the surveys. I just want to touch a little bit on the last piece, and that is the Legislative Update Committee. That is critical for us. As you're all aware, there's always over 100 bills, if not more, housing bills that are always pending. So it's important that we stay in front of those, as well as other land use and other pending legislation that would affect land use in our city. We're also working on process enhancement and development performance metrics. So we have metrics in place, and we are tracking those. We're also working on, I can't emphasize enough the importance of Intergov, and we will continue to work with IT to further improve and enhance how to ensure that the customer has a good experience and the system is user-friendly. These are some of the continuous process improvements. I want to highlight just the first one, and that is there are certain things in our code that we should amend because we've identified them as barriers and an impediment to process. So we will bring forward some of our recommendations. We will review and analyze and bring forward recommendations on some of the changes that we believe is necessary to help facilitate a streamlined process. And then we'll do all of the things that are on the list there. I can answer questions later on if you have any questions regarding those items. As I mentioned before, we have established metrics. Again, they're in your packet. But phone calls and emails, that is our bread and butter. That is what we're going to be focusing on, and that is going to be our top priority, to make sure that phone calls and emails are responded to. And currently, our policy is 2 business days. Our goal is to reduce that to 1 business day come August of this year. We're also looking at reducing our timelines for discretionary permits. And then last, all of these things, you will know about it because starting July of this year, you will receive our first quarterly report. And this report will tell you how many people we served at the counter, how many new permits we received, how many code enforcement cases we received, and so on and so forth. And we'll also include revenues, how much revenue we generated or collected during that quarter. So in July, even though these are quarterly reports, but you will receive a 6-month report, given that we haven't reported out the first quarter of this year. So this will be an annual report or a quarterly report for an entire year. So closing out here, as I mentioned, our IT folks have been instrumental in our success and been very supportive of our success and progress. So our IT folks will be helping us with creating some videos to help educate our community and giving the information making the information readily available to our public. So we talked about the internal, now the external piece. It's important. Customers, it's important that they play a role in our success. In order for us to be successful, it's important that our customers are involved and engaged as part of the process. So we're going to talk about customer service. It's important that we have our finger on the pulse of our customers. So we will continue to have quarterly customer surveys. We will initiate our industry professional group. These are groups with 10 to 12 engineers, architects, developers, to help us, inform us of what are some of the things that we need to improve to help streamline and improve our process. Our first meeting is on June 7th. It's always good to have food. So we're having a breakfast meeting to entice them to come and share their input with us. We're also going to start meeting with our community partners. These are our one-on-one Main Streets, quarterly meetings with some of our housing advocates, as well as some of our environmental nonprofit organizations, some of our interfaith, our faith-based organizations. So we have our first meeting with the Chamber of Commerce on the 5th of May, and then we are looking to schedule our first meeting with the rest of the group in June. We're going to do more pop-up events. We're also going to do more workshops with the community. We want to meet the community where they are. So we will continue with our outreach efforts there. And last but most definitely not least, this was your idea, the Encinitas Resident Academy. And we appreciate you for raising that, and we are bringing that to fruition. Working with the city manager, we will develop a plan to initiate our first Encinitas Resident Academy. We are aware of some of our adjacent or local cities that have been successful with this effort, and we will leverage their progress and lessons learned so we can be successful with ours. So next steps, we will move forward with implementing the measures that are identified in tonight's presentation per the specific timelines. We're also going to monitor. It's important that we monitor our progress and effectiveness. Based on that monitoring, what we will learn from our progress and make necessary changes as we see fit. And the City Council will be together with us through the quarterly reports, because you will be notified of where we are in our progress through the quarterly reports. So in closing, we talked about our department makeup. We've talked about the structure. We've talked about some of our shared goals, our ultimate goal, and that is to improve our customers' experience, to increase our customer satisfaction. We've also talked about the activity levels that has increased and will continue to increase. And that is not a bad thing. That is a wonderful thing. That means that our homeowners, our business owners, our customers are investing in our community. That is a great news. That is a great thing. However, that requires staff resources to help with that increase in activities. What we don't want to do is to be the delay, to delay that investment. We want to contribute and facilitate that investment. So I will leave this with you tonight, that we appreciate your support. Thank you for supporting us with the additional resources through the budget process. We can't do this alone. We need our community. We need our community partners, and we most definitely need the City Council's support. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Director Sapau. That was very comprehensive, and I appreciate you and all of your staff coming and staying so late to talk to the City Council and to basically be a united front in what you're saying to us. So I really appreciate. I know some of you are going to have to be at your desks at 8 a.m. tomorrow, and it's a late night. So thank you for staying to talk about this. I think you really nailed it in terms of saying that our goal is to increase customer satisfaction. The city's trying to serve its residents, and we want their interactions with our city to be positive and for them to be efficient and predictable. And so having those things go more smoothly and to be done in a way that leaves them feeling positive about the city is really important. And I think, we've talked a lot about the number of complaints that we on the council have received, especially recently, about this. And so I appreciate that you've taken it seriously and did a survey and have a number of process improvements that are already underway. And I thank the staff for all of the really hard work, because I know that it's difficult and that you are doing yeoman's work every day to try to process permits and help people improve their homes and put on additions and build granny flats and get short-term vacation rental permits and all the many things that you're doing, and following up on code complaints, which is, as he said, is rooted in conflict. I mean, code complaints are always, you're dealing with people who are really upset about things. So I just want to express my appreciation to everyone who works for the city, for everything you do every day to try to make it as good as possible for our residents to process the things they're trying to do. So I think do we have one public comment?
Now we have two.
We have two? Okay, let's take the two public comments and then we'll go to the council.
Randy Lang, followed by Brian Grover.
I think Brian Grover left his house to come here to give his comments tonight.
He was smart. I've been here for 3 hours. And your problem, the reason you don't have staff is, look at it. I mean, it's 10 o'clock. You hold these meetings and you don't bring food. You say that's a good idea, but I don't see you dinner here for us. My name's Randy Lang. I am happy to be here. My wife and I, we moved in the areas in the 60s. We raised our family here. We love Encinitas and appreciate having a few moments here with mayor and city council members. When I heard that this was going to pop up, it doesn't seem like it was a real popular topic for the citizens, but I've been right in the thick of processing for a small map, and I thought, why don't I come with some input, some real experience, some thoughts, if you will, that might at least give another side to what's going on. So my wife and I had this idea many years ago that we would buy some property in Leeuwenhain and then subdivide it, small subdivision, a minor subdivision, and that we would create a lot so we could have our dream home. Not developers, just husband and wife. It's a great idea. I think we picked taking a little sailboat out in the middle of a perfect storm, right? When we started this 4 or 5 years ago, because it's just been a lot of problems along the way. And hearing some of the background of what you've had to go through, 10 different directors, it sounds like a real task, and then not to mention COVID and some of the problems. I can see that I need to be quick here. We've seen both sides of the process. We've had people that are like, let's try to help you figure this out, and been reasonable and helpful. We've had sometimes some comments that's almost like, no, you can't do that. Almost kind of happy to tell us that you can't do that. Oh, you know what? You need to pay us another $2,000 for that. And again, time won't permit. I tried to talk my wife into deferring some time to me, but she said, just 3 minutes is enough. So I think they've done a good job in some ways, but we started 4 or 5 years ago with our engineer, and this dream is fading. We're not even sure we're going to finish it off. I mean, we'll finish the map, but we were approved with our tentative map, submitted last June, grading plan, improvement plan, parcel map, drainage studies, 5 documents. It's coming up on, it's been 10 months. About 3 weeks ago, we got 3 of them. We still don't have 2 of them, 2 of the reports. We're looking at a year to get these. I love those timelines, but we haven't fallen in some of those timelines, at all. And I've talked to some people in the industry, and they said, yeah, you're doing business with Encinitas, candidly, good luck. It's a mess. I think responding quickly is a great idea. Call back, email, hey, we heard from you, we'll be back to you next week, something along those lines. Could I have another minute, maybe?
How about 30 seconds?
30 seconds, Mark said go.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, and then, the thing that sometimes I'll hear, okay, well, you're a customer. Yeah, but I don't have any choices. So if you don't get back to me in a year, I don't have anywhere else to go. So it's a nice, warm, fuzzy word, and I like the concept behind it, that we're here to help you. And sometimes we've sensed that, and sometimes we haven't. I think just more problem solving, more sense of urgency, that, you're important enough that we're going to at least, sorry I can't get to you this week, I'll see you we'll talk next week. But to go months, 3, 4 phone calls, 3 or 4 emails, nothing. So they got a lot of work to do. It's uphill battle, I feel for them. But it doesn't help us move along. We're not developers, we're just a couple lots. We've put a lot of money into this. We put almost $500,000 into a public sewer. And then we're charged to hook up to it on top of that. And, interest and property taxes, and we lost a sale over it. And so it's been a tough process.
I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Sorry, I'll donate 30 seconds of my time to Randy. Brian Grover, Nolan Communities. Thank you, Mayor, Council members, for listening tonight. I just wanted to I saw this on the agenda and just wanted to speak to it a little bit. My company, Nolan Communities, has 3 active applications for roughly 540 residential homes in the city of Encinitas right now. Obviously, with COVID and various other things, you know, there have been some issues with getting things moving forward with the city. If you go look at our Fox Point Farms project right now, we have stormwater, you know, literally stormwater infrastructure and sewer infrastructure sitting on the site waiting for a permit. But what I do want to say is that, you know, Roy, Anna, Michael, the staff that are presenting before you here tonight have been working their tails off to just make things happen, and they need more support. It's been frustrating. I was in the 60%. I took that survey and I said, yes, they're performing, but it's only because I know that they have so many projects going on. Otherwise, I would have said, you know, this is not the greatest service. But I know how hard they're working, and I really do appreciate that. They're trying to move all of these projects along as quickly as they can. But we need more planners, we need more engineers. I think it's very obvious the amount of applications that are in at the city today are very different than the amount of applications that we had 5 years ago, and we need more staff. As an applicant, as a developer, we're paying the same fees. You know, I pay $150,000 for a building permit application to be reviewed, and it takes, you know, 5 months where it should be taking 30 days. So that kind of stuff is a little bit frustrating. But again, I do want to say these staff that I see up here have been working so hard just to keep my projects moving forward, and I assume they're doing the same with other applicants. So I appreciate that a ton. And I hope that, you know, you can support. It sounds like they're asking for more staff. I can't fully tell, but if that's the case, you know, please support them financially for more planners, more engineers. They need support to move these projects forward. So anyway, that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, the council wants you to ask us for the staff you need to do your work. So, and I think the budget will have a few more staff in this department, right? Do you want to say anything about that?
I will say that the council did provide not only 2 engineers in development services, but 2 additional engineers in CIP, 2 additional engineers in water, wastewater, and 2 additional planners. What I've asked the director to do is to take a look at, we do think that we need a couple of additional planners, but what we'd like to do is take the next few months, see how we do with these additional planners and additional contract planners. Making an investment in staff is wonderful. I want to make sure that we add them in a way that we don't hit a dip in the economy and then you have too many staff. But we will likely be coming back in the first or second quarter of the fiscal year asking for additional planning or engineering staff. And I will say we didn't get it in on time for this budget round. The assistant director position is one that we did not ask for in the first round of the budget discussions, but it will be something that I'll ask for when we tried to figure out where it was that we were all of a sudden getting a lot more emails and there wasn't this kind of ombudsman or facilitation between problems and then resolution. We realized that Roy used to do that as an assistant director. And then last year, in trying to make room for additional planning and engineering staff, we forego that position. And I would say it's probably a mistake that we did that last year. So I will be bringing back a recommendation to bring that back shortly.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Lyons.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the public comment in that I feel like it's the yin and the yang. You know, Randy, you were like this small map in Olivenhain, and Brian, you're like, I got 3 permits and 500 and some odd units. So it's kind of like, there's what appears to be simple, and then there's what appears to be complex. And so it was really good to get that range of insight there. And thank you, Roy, for that very thorough overview. There were just 2 things I wanted to comment on. I'll make this quick. When things aren't going well, I tend to believe, and I think it's true, that it's not the people. You hire good people. It's the things. So the things in this case are resources. The things are training. The things are systems. The things are process. So I'm glad you're focusing on that. But one of the vulnerabilities is that with so many new people, I think that it makes the training a really, really high priority. And the one thing I want to mention is the intergov system and the CSS, where we've had that, it sounds like to me, we've had it onboarded for a while. I didn't realize we got it internally in 2014. Maybe it wasn't all operational at that point, but it's been there. So I think where it really kicked in was with COVID, if I understand correctly, because everyone needed to be remote then, so everyone needed to rely on that tool. And perhaps because it wasn't what everyone was doing, we weren't trained and they weren't trained. So, and then while we're in the pandemic and we're not face-to-face and we're working digitally, it's like crisis is really important. And so the training perhaps wasn't there before we got to that point. Now, we can't predict that we're going to be in a pandemic, but I think that's the nature of that situation. And I'd like to encourage you to consider that level of training on systems and tools that we already have in place, we've already invested in as a city, and people want to be able to use, but they probably, I've heard from the development community, and I've gotten the impression too on a staff level that some training would be helpful there. And the only other thing I wanted to say is the SAC, the Staff Advisory, Advisory Committee, you were suggesting that that would be something that would be clarified and perhaps expanded or used more. I don't know specifically what it is, but it sounds like it might address some of the questions that come up when you have a customer who's not too experienced with the system. And if you can set them on the right track at that initial meeting and be confident the process isn't going to waver through their experience with the city, I think we'd be achieving a whole lot. Thanks.
Thank you.
Councilmember Kranz?
Thank you. And yes, Roy, fantastic presentation. I appreciate your passion, and I know that your team is, just as passionate, and I appreciate all the work that you folks do. It's been obvious from your presentation that the workload has been significant, and I noticed one of the slides there that pointed out turnover was in part due to work-life balance, and I think that is an important issue that we need to address so that we're not just working you guys to death. So, we'll count on the city manager to come with recommendations for how we can get to that. But I also have known Randy Lang and his wife Laura for 50 years, and so a couple years ago they reached out to ask that I help them facilitate their project, and I was, it was pretty complicated with the sewer that they were trying to do, but they got that done, and now they're into this other phase of the permitting, and they don't want to reach out to me, but I did hear from them the other day because they had something that was about to expire, and so that whole process was a bit challenging. And I mentioned that we were going to have this agenda item, and he did express a willingness to come speak, but he was hesitant because he's one of the world's nicest guys, and he doesn't want to be critical of people. And so, but I think he's got some really good examples of challenges that you need to address as the director. And so I hope you will work with him and people like him who are the small developers, the people that are just going to make improvements to their home, or they've bought a home and they want to remodel it and that sort of thing. So excellent resource. I would encourage you to tap into that. The team that I see missing here tonight is there anybody here from Eskil?
No,
And we're still working with Eskil, are we not?
that's correct.
And how many Eskil staff people are responsible for reviewing permits for the city of Encinitas, reviewing plans?
Yeah, so as far as reviewing plans, we have the building official and we have an in-house plan checker, but the rest of our plan checks goes to their corporate office.
Right.
So that includes, it could range from 2 to 6 people that
Right,
review
so
the plan
that
checks.
depends upon the amount of work that we have?
Yes, and the complexity of projects.
Okay, so if you were to plug them into your org chart, is it a particular department or is it more than one? Those are the kind of things that, you don't have to tell me now, I don't need the answer now, but I think that's an important part of the puzzle here in terms of staffing and that sort of thing. And I think, the hardest part of being in this position is the notion of adding human resources, because with human resources come significant expenses. And, if this just keeps going up, then we've got, we need to add the resources. But there is the possibility that it starts to go down, and then what do you do with the people? And so there was a reason that we were headed, we were using contract services, but I think there is a point where it is something that, you're throwing good money after bad, and hiring permanent makes sense. So again, deferring to the city manager, bring recommendations, and hopefully we have the metrics that say, yeah, this makes sense, do it this way. So that is something that I think would be very important. The other question I see on this, there was a slide here that talks about an industry professionals advisory group, and your first meeting is June 7th. I think that's outstanding. I don't know whether it would make sense to change the name to also include, it says architects, engineers, designers, developers, et cetera, but there might be business owners and landlords, and I don't know how you're defining this. Maybe they just show up and they participate in this, but I think this is an outstanding opportunity for people to provide you some feedback. So I appreciate that. And then the other, we recently became aware of a coding camp. This was a business proposal that computer coding was going to be done in one of our long-time established retail centers. And I was surprised at the requirements that there are to get the tenant improvements that he needed to open his business. So my hope is that there will be a process where we look at whether there are, and I saw it in your slide, you're talking about your forms management and identifying opportunities to streamline processes. And so that is one, I think, that's an area that I think would really benefit. The shock was that I saw his application, and it was basically the same application that a developer fills out for, construction of a new home or something. And he wanted to, put up some walls in existing square footage in a 35-year-old, 40-year-old retail center. And, those are the sort of projects that I think it benefits everybody to have a streamlined process to work through that. So thanks to Brian for coming and speaking, and Randy, thank you. IT, I would say that anything you can do to help with the Intergov rollout. I also think that that's something that I hope the city manager, if there are other modules that will help smooth this process, that we, get recommendations for those investments. We have spent millions of dollars on that system. It seems to be working fairly well. A lot of the feedback that I hear is positive. So my hope is that your team will continue to get better at how to input data so that we can make this a little bit easier for everybody. But you guys are good people, and I think that it's important that we make your life as easy as possible and be able to address our community members who are trying to get a little something done. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, in the interest of time, it's 10 o'clock, so I think we should end this item. Say thank you so much for coming, and thank you for the presentation.
And thank you to my staff. Thank you for your support. I appreciate it. And Randy Lang, I apologize for the delay, and we'll work through the remaining pieces. So.
Okay, so we'll move on. Do we have any council member reports pursuant to AB 1234 that anyone wants to share?
I did want to announce that today I was down at Petco Park with the Padres, and we were able to, with the Padres, just hanging out with the Padres and with the CEO of the Padres, and we were able to announce on Earth Week that the San Diego Padres, a great partner of San Diego Community Power, has decided to go up to 100% clean renewable energy. So we're very hopeful with this partnership that they're going to persuade and be very persuasive to other folks, other businesses and homeowners in San Diego region to move up to 100%. So they join good company with the city of San Diego, with the city of Encinitas, I meant to say, sorry, the city of Encinitas at 100%. Airport Authority at 100%, Illumina at 100%, Scripps Healthcare at 100%, Sharp Healthcare at 100%, and the list keeps on growing. So thank you. Exactly. I was like, you know what? You may be the first NL stadium to go 100%, but there are actually 2 Major League Baseball stadiums that are at 100%, and the first one is my home team of Boston. So like the 2 home teams that I root for at 100%. My work is done.
Okay, thank you. Any other reports?
Yeah, I'll just give a quick report that NCTD will meet tomorrow, and this is the date of the presentation I've been talking about for 3 weeks, where we're going to have some information about the newest Infrastructure and Jobs Act, and that is where they will hopefully give our cities more information about how to capture grant funding for all the important rail projects that we want to do. And I'm very pleased that Pam's going to be able to listen to that presentation, as well as Jill. So that's at 2 p.m. tomorrow. It's a virtual meeting, so members of the community can sign on to get some information.
And I'll be attending that also as the alternative, or the alternate. I'm sorry, it's late. The alternate.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Kranz, anything?
Well, if you're not going to talk about the youth opportunity passes.
Oh, yes, I will.
Okay,
Yes.
very good.
Okay, so yes, starting May 1, anybody who is 18 and younger can ride on transit for free. And it's for a year plus a few months. So basically all of summer, all of next school year. You have to get a Pronto Pass, which is easy to do on the app. I think probably Councilmember Kranz already has it. Or you can go and get it from NCTD or MTS. But so the coaster train is included. So families can go anywhere, kids can go to school or to jobs, whatever people want to do, age 18 and under, completely free, which is really great because it helps build interest in riding transit and comfort and reduces barriers to entry. And there are also families, of course, where that makes a big difference in their monthly budget. So we had a press conference about that, and it's really exciting. Thank you for prompting me to say that. I'm thrilled that we're doing that at Sandag.
What about seniors? Do they ride for free as well?
Seniors, no.
And I saw the photographs from the media event, and I was impressed with the lineup of women that were leading that. And I think that it's very refreshing to see. I also do have the app, but I'm a few years over 18, so I think it's going to be tough to try and get any free rides.
But you do have grandkids.
I do, but they're already free.
That's right. It's true. There were a group of, and I think they called themselves the abuelas, the abuelitas, who have been advocating for this for a long time so that their grandkids can get to things like football practice and school and stuff.
I know it's late, but maybe to mention that this is a 1 year and we need to find a funding source to continue this. And I do believe that this is the sort of thing that should be statewide, and it should be a state responsibility to find the money in the budget to do this.
That's a great point. And it should be available through college, too.
Only we knew someone going to Sacramento.
Okay. Well, any report from the city manager? City attorney report?
In the interest of time, no report.
Okay. City clerk report.
I do have one quick one. I just want to let everyone know that we're accepting applications to fill the one unscheduled vacancy on the Planning Commission for the Olivenhain representative, and that is for a term ending March 1st, 2023. All applicants must be registered voters and reside in Olivenhain, and those applications are available online.
Great. Well, with that, we are adjourned.